My husband Camille apologized to me in such a Philippines manner, saying he got his mistress pregnant and we needed to break up. I was dumbfounded, and my affection for him ran out 6 months ago. Is the mistress someone I know? I asked. Yeah, it's Kyra. Remember meeting her again at Alice's wedding reception. Since then, my husband seemed completely unashamed. Alice's wedding was the year before last, so you've been cheating for over a year. Alice was a college classmate, and Kyra was a junior 2 years behind me. She was in the same research group as Alice, and we played tennis together in college, so I remember her well. She was nicknamed Little Devil behind her back and was quite famous in a way. Huh. Oh, is that so? Time flies when you get older. My husband just laughed it off. What on earth was he thinking? I can't understand him at all. I'm Viola, 30 years old. I met my husband in the college tennis club despite him being 5 years older at 35. He often showed up as an alumnus who loved happy hours, had lots of friends, and was friendly with everyone. He took great care of freshmen and was kind, but I later realized it was limited to girls after we started dating. I cried many times due to his cheating habits back then, but I loved him and married him right after graduation. But once I started working, I got to know the real him, or rather, his useless side. He frequently appeared in the tennis club's clubhouse, acting all high and mighty with the juniors because he was completely ignored by his peers. The truth was he was so incompetent at his job that he wasn't given any serious responsibilities. Even now, there's no prospect of a raise or promotion. He's just a pretentious good-for-nothing who can't do his job or household chores. I tried various things to change him after we got married, but his refusal to change made me give up. The reason I had to divorce him wasn't just that work was busy and it was a hassle, but also because his parents were good people, a reason that had nothing to do with my husband himself. So look, we need to split up quickly because of the baby coming. You can have this apartment, and I'll leave. That's the end of it, okay? I was taken aback by his careless words and my husband's sly grin. What? No way. Let's part ways cleanly. This is not a good opportunity. As I neared my 40s, I started wanting a child. I had graduated college and started working as a full-time employee. I found myself in a situation where I was earning more than my husband, and my company offered excellent parental and maternity leave benefits. I was ready to start a family, but despite our efforts, it just wasn't happening, and it broke my heart. The love I once felt for my husband had dwindled away, especially after discovering his affair and the news that he got the other woman pregnant. I was determined to cleanly and completely end the relationship. What infuriated me even more was his lack of remorse. Instead of apologizing, he simply voiced his needs and demands. It was evident that it was time to put an end to this unpleasant relationship that had dragged on for years. We would involve a lawyer, ask for compensation, and divide our property. And of course, we would expect something from Kyra as well. However, when I voiced my concerns about the financial aspect, my husband callously suggested that I take on the debt myself since it was his affair that caused the separation. When I glared at him, he relented, admitting that he might need his father's help to cover the expenses. I proceeded with the divorce proceedings and hired a lawyer. Despite multiple calls from my in-laws pleading with me to reconsider, I remained steadfast in my decision. Even my father-in-law broke down in tears, acknowledging that if I left, it would spell the end for him. My mother-in-law begged me to reconsider, expressing her love for me like her own daughter. But even they understood once I laid bare the truth about my husband's constant infidelity and laziness. Finally, they apologized profusely, hanging their heads in shame. They even paid the compensation in a lump sum on behalf of my husband, who had no savings of his own. They made him promise never to ask for their help again and to repay them promptly. I still can't fathom how such a careless and irresponsible man could come from parents as decent and responsible as his. I decided to retreat to my parents' house. The divorce proceedings, which I had anticipated as a hassle, wrapped up faster than I expected. Returning to my recently relocated family home, 6 months flew by. I found myself consumed by work on weekdays and occupied with household chores on weekends, leaving little room to dwell on my ex-husband. Then, out of the blue, my best friend Alice called, seething with anger from the moment she started speaking. Viola, did you know your ex-husband Camille and Kyra? They're living it up in a new high-rise apartment, flaunting their wealth everywhere. Kyra even had the audacity to invite me to her baby shower party. The presents alone cost over $100, and there's a $100 participation fee. It's outrageous, isn't it? She exclaimed. I was taken aback by the news. I hadn't realized that Kyra had given birth, let alone why she would reach out to Alice. Both my ex-husband and Kyra were well aware that Alice was my best friend. Why would Kyra even extend an invitation to her, knowing Alice would undoubtedly relay everything to me? When I tentatively mentioned this to Alice, her anger escalated even further. She did it deliberately, Viola. Deliberately. That awful woman had the nerve to tell me she's so happy now, thanks to Viola breaking up with Camille. Can you believe her audacity? She's the worst kind of person. I want to put her in her place somehow. Alice raged. That nickname from our college days resurfaced in my mind. Kara was always known as the little devil, stirring up trouble among seemingly happy couples. Even when relationships were strained because of her involvement, she remained composed, wearing a facade of innocence. If a couple splits up just because someone else shows interest, it wasn't true love to begin with, right? They would have broken up eventually anyway, so what's the harm? She'd say, her words dripping with sugary sweetness, all the while smirking knowingly. I felt a pang of pity for Kyra, realizing she might never have experienced genuine love. Despite this, I knew better than to involve myself with her, so I made the conscious decision to keep my distance, at least for the time being. Kara didn't matter much to me. There was something else that demanded my attention. Alice. There's only one newly constructed high-rise apartment building, right? Have you heard anything about them moving in? I asked Alice, seeking any information she might have. I've never met them, Alice quickly replied, but apparently it was very recent. They'd been boasting about securing a spot. Fortunately, someone who had bought one of the units had to relocate for work and put it back on the market without moving in. Ah, that makes sense, I nodded, processing the information. So, your moving day is Sunday, right? The baby shower party is on Saturday. You'll only need to be cautious for one day. There are multiple elevators, and they might use different entrances. You're right, we haven't crossed paths so far, so it should be fine. Alice concurred. We live together, but unexpected situations can still arise. As fate would have it, an unexpected situation did indeed unfold on Saturday. While waiting for the elevator on the first floor, I found myself face to face with my ex-husband and Kyra as they stepped out of the elevator. Hey, Viola, what are you doing here? My ex-husband spoke first, with Kyra chiming in. Viola, are you here to celebrate with us? You must be eager to see our adorable baby, aren't you? Kyra's voice was cheerful, her smile radiant, but her eyes betrayed a different story. They held no hint of amusement. What? Seriously, did you come to crash the party without an invitation? My ex-husband interjected, his tone incredulous. To scope out the high-rise apartment or catch a glimpse of our little prince. The casual reference to the baby as both baby and prince grated on my nerves. That's not it, I retorted coolly. I was just waiting for the elevator. I responded, consciously switching to a polite tone midway through the conversation. Camille was now my ex, essentially a stranger, and I didn't want to create a scene. Ha, so you're planning to visit my house after all? Camille remarked with a hint of amusement. You're so silly, Viola. Stop being stubborn. Perhaps you're just envious of our luxurious high-rise apartment and our adorable little prince. Do you still harbor feelings for me? Are you feeling lonely and longing to see me again? Camille, that's not acceptable, I interjected firmly. Regardless of any lingering emotions you think I may have, you're now married to Kyra. It's inappropriate for me to barge into your home uninvited. And as for jealousy, Kyra, you're mistaken, but I appreciate your concern. Camille continued, dismissing my words. Sorry, Viola, but Kyra and our son are our top priorities now. You're not welcome here. As I listened to their conversation, I couldn't help but feel perplexed. It had been 6 months since I last saw my ex-husband, and yet his mindset remained as irrational as ever. Kara's attitude was equally baffling. It dawned on me that my cheating ex-husband and his new partner were a perfect match in their own peculiar way. Reflecting on it, I regretted wasting my precious 20s on Camille. I'm utterly ashamed of my past with Camille, wishing to bury those memories deep in darkness. If only I had ended things sooner without making excuses, I wouldn't have to endure this nonsense from my ex-husband and his partner. My words seemed to strike a nerve with Camille, who retorted, What's that? You're really lacking charm. Learn from Kyra. Even her jealousy is endearing. She's just given birth, yet she still takes the effort to look stylish for me. Don't you find her admirable? Not at all embarrassed. I replied calmly. I was simply going to the grocery store. I was dressed in a plain white t-shirt and jeans, clean and presentable. That's the problem. I grew tired of your simplicity. Camille snapped. Enough already. We have nothing to do with each other. Just go home. Annoyed by his dismissive tone, I retorted, actually, this is my home. Seeing their disbelief, I had to explain. I've been living with my parents in this high-rise apartment for 6 months now. My father was approached by salespeople when talks of selling the land he owns arose. They suggested that living in a high-rise would be more convenient, especially as he's getting older. While it's not entirely our land, we received a substantial sum from selling it. During negotiations, we were able to move into one of the higher floors for much less than market value. Camille was taken aback. You're landowners with that much money. If I had known, I wouldn't have agreed to the divorce. Give me back the compensation money. There's no need for a property settlement, I replied firmly. The compensation was a result of your affair, and the property settlement was a matter between us as a married couple. As I spoke, I noticed Kyra mumbling to herself, her silence speaking volumes. I caught it. I can't believe Viola is living in a high-rise. I thought I had totally won, Kyra exclaimed, shooting me a glare. But Viola, you don't have a baby or a loving partner, do you? I haven't lost yet. Look, Kyra, I was never competing with you, I replied calmly. In fact, I'm thankful to you for giving me the opportunity to break up with Camille. Oh, and I'm moving out of my house tomorrow, so I don't think we'll see each other again. What? Why? You just moved into a high-rise, they both exclaimed in surprise. I shrugged, explaining, maybe it's a matter of different values. It just wasn't a good fit for my family. I found living in a high-rise unsuitable for hanging laundry outside. There are no balconies on the higher floors for safety, and only some windows can be opened. It wasn't suitable for my mother and me, who preferred drying laundry and bedding in natural sunlight and wind without using a dryer. Plus, the intense sunlight made it too hot even with the air conditioning on. The building also shakes quite a bit during even a magnitude 3 earthquake. It's designed to sway to prevent collapse, and the higher floors shake more. It was terrifying. Most stressful of all was the daily elevator ride. It gets crowded during the morning commute, and it takes time since it stops on each floor. The advertised 3-minute walk from the station felt much longer in the elevator. We were too bothered by the drawbacks unique to high-rise living, so we decided to move to a regular house with a garden. After all, luckily, our apartment sold quickly at almost the same price we bought it for. As I finished explaining, both my ex-husband and Kyra grinned. So we'll never see each other again. So, a high-rise wasn't suitable for commoners like you. It's more suited for an elite celebrity family like mine, Kyra remarked sarcastically. I couldn't comprehend how he arrived at that conclusion, but one thing became abundantly clear. What I grew to despise and ultimately gave up on was that facet of you, pretentiousness without substance, and unwillingness to change or exert any effort. I reached my breaking point with you, but it's alright now. You're beyond repair, so goodbye, I repeated, echoing my ex-husband's own words back to him. Stepping into the just-arrived elevator, I glanced at Kyra, who was glaring at both my astonished ex-husband and me. Right before the doors closed, I added one final remark. By the way, are you sure the child is truly yours? My ex-husband looked utterly perplexed, prompting me to clarify. I mean exactly what I said, right, Kyra? You understand what I'm implying, don't you? As the doors closed, I didn't know what transpired next in reality. However, during our struggle to conceive, I underwent tests at the gynecologist's, which revealed no issues on my end. I began to suspect the problem might lie with my husband, but he adamantly refused to get tested. Hence, I delivered that incendiary parting shot. Later, I heard from a mutual friend who attended Kyra's baby shower. Despite boasting about their high-rise lifestyle, my ex-husband and Kyra were residing on the 3rd floor. Additionally, despite their extravagant demands for gifts and participation fees, only cheap snacks from the grocery store were served. When a friend voiced a soft complaint, Kyra reportedly exploded, demanding gratitude for the chance to see her baby up close and insisting on payment. This sparked a heated argument between my ex-husband and Kyra, leaving their gathering in disarray. Thanks in part to my earlier cryptic remark, it was revealed that my ex-husband and Kyra had moved into a high-rise but were struggling financially, attempting to swindle money from their friends through fabricated reasons. Their deceit caused outrage among their friends, who promptly left. Meanwhile, my family and I settled into a single-family home with a garden, where I recently welcomed an adorable kitten. Our former high-rise was embroiled in controversy due to significant defects and illegal construction methods, making it unsellable. Reflecting on our situation, we realized we were unexpectedly fortunate. Now, I find solace in my severed ties with my ex-husband and cherish the tranquility of my peaceful days. As I hang the laundry on a sunny afternoon, my kitten sometimes curls up on the clothes, its adorable sleeping face bringing me a sense of contentment. Today, like many others, was a good day.
My name is Brittany, and I often think about how different my life could have been if my mom hadn't gotten sick. She passed away when I was 6, and that's when everything changed. Our house used to be full of her laughter, and the photos of our happy family covered every wall. Dad took it really hard. For months, he barely spoke, just went to work and came back home, where I tried my best to be quiet and not bother him. I didn't really understand death back then. I kept asking when Mom would come back from heaven. Dad would just hug me tight and say nothing. Then he met Sandra at some work event. She started coming over for dinner, and I noticed Dad smiling more. I guess that's why I didn't say anything when, one by one, Mom's photos started disappearing from the walls, replaced by new ones with Sandra in them. "Brittany, Sandra, and I have something to tell you," Dad said one evening. They sat me down in our living room, and I remember playing with the hem of my dress, feeling nervous. "Sandra and I are getting married. She's going to live with us and be your new mom. You'll see, everything will be wonderful." But it wasn't wonderful. As soon as they got back from their honeymoon, Sandra started changing things. She rearranged all the furniture, repainted the walls, and set up what she called house rules. "Brittany, your room is a mess again," she'd say every morning. "A young lady should keep her space tidy. And please keep your voice down when you're playing, I have a headache." I always had to help with chores, even though I was just 6. When I complained to Dad, he'd just say, "Listen to Sandra, honey. She knows what's best for you." One day, I overheard them arguing in their bedroom. I pressed my ear against the door, trying to make out the words. "She's just not adjusting well, John," Sandra was saying. "Maybe it would be better if she lived with your mother? She's always saying how much she misses having family around." No, Dad's voice was quiet. "I promised Sarah, I promised her before I swore I'd take care of Brittany. And there's the money she left for Brittany's college. I gave my word it would go to her education." I didn't know it then, but things were about to get even harder. A year later, Sandra got pregnant, and everything changed again. Dad was over the moon, and Sandra couldn't stop talking about how she was finally going to have her own child. Those words hurt more than any chore or rule she'd ever given me. Because that's what I was to her, someone else's child. Not her own, never her own. When Emma was born, I was 8 years old. I remember standing in the hospital hallway with Dad, peering through the nursery window at my new baby sister. She was so tiny, wrapped in a pink blanket, and Dad couldn't stop smiling. "You're a big sister now, Brittany," he said proudly. "You'll help take care of Emma, won't you?" I nodded eagerly, not understanding what that really meant. But I found out pretty quickly when they brought Emma home. Sandra wasted no time in turning me into her personal assistant. "Brittany, bring me fresh diapers. Brittany, wash these bottles. Brittany, hold Emma while I make a phone call." The demands never stopped. By the time I was 9, I knew how to change diapers, prepare baby formula, and cook simple baby food. While other kids my age were playing outside after school, I was mashing bananas and stirring rice cereal for Emma. "But I want to go to Sarah's birthday party," I remember pleading one Saturday. "Emma needs you here," Sandra said firmly. "She's teething and fussy. Besides, someone needs to clean up the mess she made in the playroom." As Emma grew, so did my responsibilities. I had to watch her constantly, making sure she didn't fall while learning to walk or put dangerous things in her mouth. Meanwhile, Emma was showered with attention and gifts. Every tantrum was rewarded with a new toy or treat. When she turned 4, Emma realized she could get me in trouble whenever she wanted. And boy, did she use that power. One time, she deliberately spilled her juice all over her new dress, then ran crying to Sandra. "Brittany pushed me," she wailed. "I spent that weekend grounded in my room." Another time, she broke her expensive musical toy and blamed me. "Brittany was playing with it when it broke," she claimed. It didn't matter that I was doing homework at the time. I lost my allowance for a month to pay for a replacement. The worst was when she cut up her own party dress with scissors, then hid the scissors in my backpack. Sandra found them during one of her room inspections. "How could you be so jealous?" Sandra yelled at me. "Do you know how much that dress cost?" But I didn't. I tried to explain. "Go to your room," Dad interrupted. "We'll discuss your punishment later." Emma stood in the doorway, smirking at me as I walked past. She'd learned early that she could get away with anything, while I'd get blamed for everything. Grandma Rose was my only escape from the madness at home. Every weekend I spent at her house felt like stepping into a different world, one where I could just be a kid. She lived in a cozy house filled with the smell of fresh-baked cookies and unconditional love. "Look at you, skin and bones," she'd say, loading my plate with pancakes. "That woman's got you running around like Cinderella." Unlike at home, at Grandma's house, I could laugh as loud as I wanted and didn't have to watch my every step. When Emma visited with me once, she quickly learned that her usual tricks wouldn't work there. "But I want ice cream before dinner," Emma had whined, stomping her feet. "Young lady," Grandma said firmly, "in this house, we eat our dinner first. And there's no rewards for tantrums." Emma never came back after that. "Grandma's house is boring," she told our parents. What she meant was that Grandma's house had rules that applied to everyone equally. Then came the day that changed everything. Emma had thrown a particularly dramatic fit about doing her homework, and Grandma happened to be visiting. "John," Grandma said to Dad, her voice stern, "that child is terribly spoiled. Sandra, you need to handle this better. You're raising a little tyrant." Sandra's face turned red. "How dare you criticize my parenting? You have no right." "I have every right when I see my granddaughters being treated so differently," Grandma shot back. "Look at what you're doing to Brittany." That night, I heard more shouting from downstairs. Sandra was crying, saying she wouldn't tolerate such disrespect. Dad, as usual, took her side. The next day, Sandra announced that we would no longer be visiting Grandma Rose. "But that's not fair," I protested. "Life isn't fair," Sandra snapped. "And if I catch you trying to contact her, you'll be grounded until college." College. That word became my lifeline during the next couple of years. I threw myself into studying, counting down the days until graduation. Mom had left money for my education. I'd overheard Dad talking about it enough times. That money was my ticket out. Then came graduation day. I was still in my cap and gown when Dad and Sandra sat me down for a serious talk. About college, Dad started, not meeting my eyes. "We've decided to save that money for Emma's education instead." The world stopped. "What?" "Your sister has such bright prospects," Sandra added smoothly. "And you, well, you're more suited for practical work." Something inside me snapped. For the first time in my life, I screamed. "That's my money. Mom left it for me." "You promised her, Dad. You're just a liar." "You ungrateful girl," Dad shouted, his face red. "After everything we've done for you. Get out. Tomorrow you can start your adult life somewhere else." I didn't wait for tomorrow. I ran upstairs, threw some clothes and essentials into my backpack, grabbed the hidden photo of Mom, and walked out. My friend Jenny had always said I could stay with her family if things got bad, and now things had gotten as bad as they could get. Life as a waitress wasn't what I'd dreamed of doing after high school, but it paid the bills, barely. I started at the Silver Spoon, a busy downtown restaurant, working double shifts whenever I could. My feet ached every night, and I smelled like French fries and burger grease, but at least I was free. Jenny's parents were amazing, letting me stay with them for those first few months. But I knew I couldn't impose forever. That's when I met Maria, another waitress at the restaurant, who was looking for a roommate. The apartment's tiny, she warned me, and the neighbors are loud, but it's cheap. She wasn't kidding about tiny. Our shared apartment could barely fit 2 beds and a couch. But it was ours, and neither of us had to answer to anyone else. We worked the same shifts, shared grocery bills, and somehow made it work. Any plans for school? Maria would ask sometimes, as we counted our tips after closing. I'd just shake my head. With rent, utilities, and food, I could barely save anything. College felt like a distant dream that had died the night I left home. Then, on a random Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. I almost dropped the coffee pot I was holding when I saw the number. "Brittany, sweetheart, I've been trying to track you down. How's college going?" My throat tightened. "I'm not in college, Grandma." "What do you mean?" Your father had Sarah's money set aside. I found myself telling her everything, the fight, getting kicked out, working as a waitress. By the end, I was crying in the restaurant's break room, and Grandma was silent for so long I thought we'd lost connection. "Those miserable, selfish." She finally said, her voice shaking with anger. "Listen to me, Brittany. I'm paying for your college. No arguments." "Grandma, no, I can't let you. You're not letting me do anything." "I'm doing it. Your mother was like a daughter to me, and I won't let them steal your future." "Have you looked at any schools?" "I could try the local university. They have evening classes." "Perfect. We'll get you enrolled for next semester." "But Brittany?" She paused. "Let's keep this between us. I don't want to deal with your father or that woman." I laughed through my tears. "Trust me, Grandma, neither do I." So that's how I became a full-time waitress and a part-time student. My days started at 5 a.m. with studying, then classes, then straight to work until closing. I'd come home exhausted, feet blistered, smelling like restaurant food, only to crack open my books again. Maria thought I was crazy. "Girl, when do you sleep?" "Sleep is for the weak," I'd joke, downing my 3rd cup of coffee. But for the first time since I'd left home, I felt like I was moving forward. Every test I passed, every paper I turned in, felt like a small victory. Not just for me, but for Mom too. I might not have gotten to use her money, but I was still going to get the education she'd wanted for me. And the best part? Nobody from my family knew. They probably imagined me still serving tables, going nowhere in life. Let them think that. I was done trying to prove myself to people who'd never cared anyway. I was studying for my business management final when Emma's message popped up on Facebook. There she was, grinning beside a brand new red Mercedes, wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Look what Mom and Dad got me for my birthday." Not that you'd know anything about nice cars, huh? Still serving burgers? Must be fun watching everyone else live their best life while you're stuck being a waitress forever. The next photo was of her college acceptance letter. "Got into State U. Mom and Dad are paying for everything, tuition, housing, meal plan. They even promised me a spring break trip to Europe. But hey, at least you get free fries with your shift meal, right?" I stared at my textbook, then back at her message. I could have told her about my 3.9 GPA, about how I was about to graduate with honors. Instead, I clicked block user and went back to studying. 3 weeks later, I graduated with my business degree. Only Grandma was there to watch me walk across the stage, but that was all I needed. We went out for dinner afterward, at a different restaurant, of course. Back at work, things started changing. Mr. Peterson, the owner, called me into his office one morning. "Brittany, we've noticed how hard you work. How would you feel about becoming shift manager? You know this place inside and out, the staff respects you, and you've got the education for it now." That was just the beginning. 6 months later, I was promoted to floor administrator. My salary doubled, and suddenly I could afford to move out of the tiny apartment I shared with Maria. Years passed, and I kept climbing. By 30, I was running the whole place. The Silver Spoon had transformed from a regular downtown restaurant into one of the city's top dining spots. My name was on restaurant industry magazines, but my family still thought I was just a waitress. My new apartment was in one of those fancy high-rises downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city. Every morning, I'd stand there with my coffee, watching the sunrise, thinking about how far I'd come from that scared teenager who ran away with just a backpack. It was a quiet Monday morning when I got the Facebook message from Mrs. Roberts, our old neighbor. We'd kept in touch over the years. She was one of the few people from my old life who'd been kind to me. She'd often slipped me cookies when Sandra was being particularly harsh, and once even helped me hide my mom's photo album when Sandra wanted to throw it away. "Brittany, honey, I thought you should know. Emma's graduating next week, and she's planning something nasty. She's made reservations at the Silver Spoon. She knows you work there. She's been bragging to everyone about how she's going to have you wait on her table. Says it'll be hilarious to have her college dropout sister serve her graduation party. She's invited all her snobby friends and even some of our old neighbors. She's been telling everyone how she's going to show them what a failure you turned out to be. I thought you should know." I sat back in my leather office chair, looking out over the restaurant floor, through the one-way glass. The lunch rush was just beginning, and I watched my well-trained staff move efficiently between tables, like a perfectly choreographed dance. A slow smile spread across my face as I opened our reservation system. Sure enough, there it was, Emma Wilson, party of 15, Saturday 7 p.m., graduation celebration. She'd even added a special note requesting the best table in the house, price is no object. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could cancel it. One click, and their reservation would disappear. I could have Janet call with some excuse about a plumbing emergency or a double booking. But no, I had a better idea. I picked up my phone and called Grandma, who answered on the second ring. She was probably in her garden. She always kept her phone close while tending to her prized roses. "You'll never guess who's coming to dine at my restaurant," I said when she answered. "Who?" "Emma. And Dad and Sandra. They're coming to celebrate her graduation. Apparently, she specifically chose this place to humiliate her waitress sister. Mrs. Roberts just warned me about it." Grandma's voice turned sharp. "Cancel their reservation. You don't need that kind of negativity in your life, Brittany. Haven't they hurt you enough?" Actually, I couldn't help grinning as I looked at the framed Businesswoman of the Year award on my wall. "I have a better idea. How would you like to come to dinner that night? I'll give you the best table in the house, behind the marble column by the waterfall wall. You'll be able to see everything, but they won't see you." There was a pause, then Grandma started laughing, that deep, mischievous laugh that always meant trouble when I was growing up. "Oh, you devious girl. Count me in. Should I wear my pearls for the occasion? Perfect. I'll have Carlos make your favorite chocolate souffle. He's been practicing that new raspberry sauce you liked last time." "I'll bring my camera," Grandma chuckled. "This is going to be better than those reality TV shows you used to watch." After we hung up, I called in my assistant. "Janet, clear my schedule for next Saturday evening. And make sure the staff knows I'll be handling a special table personally." "Of course, Ms. Wilson." "Anything else?" "Yes," I smiled, running my finger along the spine of my business management degree diploma hanging on the wall. "Make sure we have our finest champagne chilled. And have Miguel prepare his special caviar appetizers. I have a feeling it's going to be quite a memorable night." As I looked out over my restaurant again, I couldn't help but think how perfect this was. Emma had always loved her little power plays, her attempts to humiliate me. Well, this time, she was walking right into my territory. And I was ready. Saturday evening arrived, and the restaurant was buzzing with its usual weekend energy. I watched from my office as my sister's party arrived, Emma in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, Sandra in her typical overdone makeup, and Dad looking older than I remembered. They were surrounded by Emma's friends, all dressed to impress. I could see Grandma at her hidden table, pretending to read the menu while watching everything. She gave me a subtle wink when I passed by. "Excuse me," Emma's loud voice carried across the restaurant. "I specifically requested my sister, Brittany, as our server." "Where is she?" I smoothed down my tailored suit jacket and approached their table. Emma's face lit up with malicious delight when she saw me. "Oh my God, everyone, this is my sister I was telling you about." She gestured at me like I was some exhibit at a zoo. Still a waitress after all these years. I mean, I just graduated from State U, and she's still carrying plates. The table erupted in laughter, led by Emma. Dad chuckled too, though he couldn't quite meet my eyes. Sandra just sat there with that superior smirk I remembered so well. "Look at her clothes," Emma stage whispered to her friends. "I guess that's what you can afford on a waitress's salary." I stood there in my Armani suit, letting them laugh. The irony wasn't lost on me. "What can I get for you this evening?" I asked professionally. Emma made a show of studying the menu. "Well, since you asked, I'll have the lobster thermidor." "Oh wait." She looked up with fake concern. "Can you even afford to eat at a place like this? Do you know what lobster is?" More forced laughter from her friends, though some were starting to look uncomfortable. And after dinner, Emma continued, her voice dripping with contempt, "I want you to personally wash our dishes. I'll even give you a nice tip, maybe you can buy yourself some decent clothes for once." I could see Grandma gripping her table's edge so hard her knuckles were white. Some of the guests were whispering among themselves, clearly embarrassed by Emma's behavior. Sandra finally spoke up, her voice cold. "Really, Brittany, you should be grateful Emma chose your establishment for her celebration. Though I must say, I'm surprised they hired someone like you at such a nice place." "Actually," I said, my smile never wavering, "I won't be able to take your order or wash your dishes tonight." Emma's face darkened. "What do you mean, you won't?" "I want to speak to your manager right now." "I'll have you fired." "That won't be necessary," I said calmly. "The manager is already here." "Well, where are they?" Emma demanded, looking around. "You're looking at her." The silence that fell over the table was absolute. Emma's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Dad's face had gone completely white, and Sandra looked like she'd swallowed something sour. That's impossible," Emma finally sputtered. "You're lying. You're just a waitress." "Actually," came a familiar voice, "she's not just the manager. She owns 30% of this restaurant now." Grandma rose from her hidden table and walked over, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The look she gave Dad could have frozen hell over. "While you were busy spoiling one daughter and crushing the other, I put Brittany through college. She worked here as a waitress during the day and studied business management at night. Every single success she has, she earned herself." Emma jumped up, her face red. "That's not fair. You're lying. She's nothing but a successful businesswoman who owns part of one of the city's most prestigious restaurants?" Grandma cut in. "Who bought her own luxury apartment while you're still living off Daddy's money?" "Is that what you were going to say?" Dad finally found his voice. "Mom, Don't you dare, Mom me, John Wilson," Grandma snapped. "You let that woman turn you against your own daughter. You gave away Brittany's college money her mother left specifically for her. Well, guess what? I'm making things right. I've already changed my will. Everything I own goes to Brittany. Every penny." Sandra shot up from her chair. "You can't do that. Emma is your granddaughter too." "Emma has had everything handed to her on a silver platter her entire life," Grandma replied coldly. "She doesn't need my money, though from what I've seen tonight, she could use some basic human decency." Emma completely lost it. She grabbed her wine glass and hurled it across the table, shattering plates and sending food flying. "This isn't fair. You're all just jealous of me." "Security," I called calmly. 2 men in black suits appeared instantly. "Please escort these people out." "You can't throw us out," Sandra screamed. "Do you know who we are?" "Yes, I do," I replied. "You're trespassers causing a disturbance in my restaurant. Leave now, or I'll call the police and press charges for the damage to my property." Emma tried to grab another plate, but one of the security guards caught her arm. Dad just stood there, looking lost, as they were all led to the door. "Brittany," he called back weakly. "Please, can we talk?" I turned my back and walked away. Over the next few months, he tried everything: calls, emails, even showing up at the restaurant once. I had security turn him away. That was 5 years ago. The Silver Spoon is now the top-rated restaurant in the city, and I've opened 2 more locations. Grandma kept her word about the will, though thankfully she's still going strong at 75, tending her garden and coming to the restaurant every Sunday for her chocolate soufflé. Last week, I got another message from Emma. Something about how she's changed and wants to make amends. I did what I always do with messages from that part of my life, hit delete and went back to work. Some chapters are better left closed. My name is Maya Richardson, and I grew up watching my parents build their sports nutrition empire from the ground up. Some might think being born into a wealthy family meant a life of luxury and ease, but that couldn't be further from the truth. My parents, especially my father, made sure I understood the value of hard work from day one. I can still remember the first time Dad brought me to the office. I was 7, wearing my favorite blue dress with tiny flowers, trying to look as professional as a second grader could. "Maya," he said, setting me up at a small desk near his office, "one day, all of this might be yours. But you'll have to earn it, just like I did." Those words shaped my entire childhood. While other kids spent their summers by the pool, I was learning about inventory management and customer service. Mom sometimes worried I was missing out on being a kid, but I loved every minute of it. The company, Richardson Nutrition, became my second home. College flew by in a blur of business classes and internships at Dad's company. I worked in every department, starting from the warehouse up. No special treatment, that was our deal. The employees who'd known me since childhood watched with approval as I learned the ropes from the ground up. After graduation, I dove headfirst into my role at the company. My days were packed with meetings, reports, and strategy sessions. Dating? That was a foreign concept. My college roommate Sarah used to joke that I was married to my job. Everything changed at the company's annual holiday party. I was running late, as usual, having stayed behind to finish some quarterly reports. When I finally arrived at the venue, the party was in full swing. That's when I saw him, James Cooper, from our Denver branch. Tall, with warm brown eyes and an easy smile that made the exhaustion of my 14-hour workday melt away. "You must be Maya," he said, extending his hand. "I've heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope?" I laughed, accepting his handshake. "The best. Though they didn't mention you were beautiful." That night, we talked for hours. About work, about family, about our dreams. He seemed to understand me in a way no one else had. When he asked for my number at the end of the night, my heart did a little flip. After James returned to Denver, we started messaging each other constantly. Every morning started with his "good morning, beautiful" text, and every night ended with long conversations about our days. It felt like I'd known him forever. One night, after a particularly long video call, I took a leap. "Why don't you transfer to the main office? We could be together, and it would be great for your career." There was a pause on his end. "Maya, I can't. My family's here in Denver. My parents, my sister, my nephew, we're really close. I couldn't leave them." My heart sank a little, but then he added, "But why don't you come here? The Denver branch could use someone with your expertise." I sat with that thought for a day before approaching Dad in his office. "Daddy, I need your advice. What would you think about me transferring to the Denver branch?" I watched his face carefully as I explained about James. To my surprise, Dad just smiled. "I've been wondering when you'd ask. James has a good reputation in the company, and the Denver branch could use strong leadership. If this is what you want, I'll make it happen." 2 weeks later, I was standing in James's apartment in Denver, surrounded by moving boxes. "Welcome home," he said, wrapping his arms around me. I felt like I was exactly where I should be. The first meeting with his family came sooner than I expected. They all lived together in a modest 2-story house: his parents, Tom and Linda, his sister Rachel, and her teenage son Kyle. I was nervous as we pulled up to their house. "Your family must have a mansion," Linda said the moment I walked in. "This must seem so simple to you." I felt my cheeks flush. "Oh no, not at all. We've always lived pretty normally. No mansions or private jets, just a regular house." "But surely with your family's wealth," Tom started. "I've worked for everything since I was a kid," I explained. "Dad believed in earning your way. I'm more comfortable with simple things, honestly." I caught the disappointed looks they exchanged, but tried to ignore them. Rachel, James's sister, just looked me up and down, eyeing my simple sweater and jeans. "If I had your money, I wouldn't be caught dead in anything but designer labels," she said with a smirk. I just shrugged, not knowing how to respond. James squeezed my hand under the table, but said nothing to defend me. 2 months later, James proposed during a walk in the park. It wasn't elaborate, just us, a simple ring, and a heartfelt question. I said yes immediately. When it came to wedding planning, we had our first real disagreement. James wanted something extravagant, a huge venue, hundreds of guests, all the trimmings. "Babe, we don't need all that," I argued. "Let's do something small and meaningful." He eventually gave in, though not happily. We had a modest ceremony with just immediate family present. But I couldn't help overhearing Linda during the reception, whispering to her sister, "I expected something much grander from someone with her background. All this, it's so plain." I pretended not to hear, but their words stung more than I wanted to admit. The ink had barely dried on our marriage certificate when the questions about housing started. We were having Sunday dinner at Tom and Linda's when they brought it up. It was a typical family gathering, Rachel texting on her phone, Kyle playing video games in the corner, and Tom watching sports on TV while we ate. "So, Maya," Linda said, passing the mashed potatoes, "have you talked to your father about buying you two a house? Something in the Cherry Creek area would be perfect. I was just looking at listings there yesterday. There's this beautiful 5-bedroom with a pool." I nearly choked on my water. "Actually, we're planning to save up and buy our own place." The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel's fork stopped midway to her mouth. Tom muted the TV and turned to stare at me. Linda's face froze in that artificial smile I was beginning to recognize all too well. They exchanged loaded glances that made me feel like I'd said something terribly wrong. "But surely your father wouldn't mind." Tom started, wiping his mouth with his napkin. "I mean, it's just natural for parents to help their children get started. Especially when they're so capable." I cut him off firmly but politely, sitting up straighter in my chair. "James and I want to do this on our own. We're both working, and we can save up. I believe in earning what you have." James reached for my hand under the table, his palm slightly sweaty. "I support Maya on this," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Besides, my apartment is perfectly fine for now. I've been renting it for years, and it's in a great location." Linda's eyes lit up suddenly, like she'd just had a brilliant idea. She set down her wine glass with a little too much force. "Well, if you're staying in the apartment, Maya should pay the rent. After all, she makes quite a bit more than you do, James. It's only fair." I watched as my husband nodded in agreement, a little too quickly for my comfort. "That makes sense," he said, not meeting my eyes. It's $3,000 a month. The amount took me by surprise. Denver wasn't cheap, but that seemed high for our neighborhood. Still, I didn't want to create waves. The tension in the room was already thick enough to cut with a knife. Sure, that's fair, I said, trying to keep my voice light. So our routine was established. Every month, I'd give James $3,000, and he'd handle the rent payment. Sometimes I'd see him making the transfer on his phone, always quick to close the screen if I walked by. It went on like this for a while until one day, a thought occurred to me while I was reviewing our monthly expenses. Hey, I said one evening while we were having dinner in our kitchen, the sounds of the city drifting in through the open window, since I'm paying the rent now, maybe I should take over the lease? We could put it in my name. It would make sense for tax purposes. James's reaction was immediate and strange. He tensed up, nearly dropping his fork onto his half-eaten pasta. His face paled slightly. No, that wouldn't work, he said quickly, his voice higher than usual. I've been renting from Mr. Johnson for years. He trusts me. We don't want to mess with a good thing. Something about his reaction bothered me deeply. The way his eyes wouldn't quite meet mine, the slight tremor in his hands as he reached for his water glass. But I pushed the feeling aside, like I'd been doing with so many little things lately. Life in Denver had fallen into a routine. I was settling into my role at the branch office, managing my team, and having weekly video calls with Mom and Dad. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. But there was one issue that kept gnawing at me. It happened for the first time on a Tuesday. I came home from work early with a headache, only to find Linda and Rachel sitting on my couch, watching my TV, eating the expensive salmon I'd bought for James's birthday dinner. "Oh, Maya," Linda said, not even getting up. "We were just having a little snack." I stood there, key still in hand, staring at them. They had their shoes up on my coffee table, magazines scattered everywhere, and my kitchen looked like a tornado had hit it. This became a regular occurrence. I'd come home to find them there, or worse, come home to evidence they'd been there, empty food containers, things moved around, my closet clearly rifled through. They had keys. Of course they had keys. One evening, I tried talking to James about it. "Honey, don't you think it's a bit strange that your mom and sister just come in whenever they want?" He barely looked up from his phone. "They're family, Maya. You're being dramatic, just calm down." But I couldn't calm down. Not when I found them going through my personal papers one afternoon, giggling over my diary from college that they'd discovered in a box I hadn't unpacked yet. "We need to talk," I said firmly, my hands shaking slightly. "This isn't okay. You can't just come into our home without asking. You can't go through our things." Linda's face crumpled instantly. Tears sprang to her eyes like someone had turned on a faucet. "How dare you," she wailed. "After everything we've done to welcome you into our family. I knew you were too good for us, with your fancy background." As if on cue, James walked in. He took in the scene, his mother sobbing, Rachel glaring at me, and me standing there in shock. "What did you do?" he demanded, rushing to his mother's side. "She's trying to keep us away from you," Linda cried into his shoulder. "She says we're not welcome here anymore." "That's not what I started," but James cut me off. "How could you treat them like this? They're my family." After they left, James turned on me. His face was hard in a way I'd never seen before. "You need to fix this," he said. "Buy them something nice, really nice, and apologize." The next day, I went shopping after work. I bought Linda a designer handbag she'd been hinting about, and Rachel a pair of expensive boots. My hands felt dirty as I wrapped them. When I delivered the gifts to their house, they accepted them with smug smiles. "We knew you'd come around," Linda said, not even looking at me as she examined the handbag. "These will do," Rachel added, trying on the boots. That night, James finally spoke to me again. "See, was that so hard?" he asked, kissing my cheek. But something had changed. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on yet. After the boundary incident, things got worse in ways I hadn't imagined possible. Linda and Rachel turned gift demanding into an art form. Every minor holiday became an occasion for expectations. "Maya, you know it's National Sisters' Day next week," Rachel would text. "I saw this beautiful Gucci bag. It's the anniversary of when I first held James as a baby," Linda would announce. "I think a spa weekend would be appropriate to mark the occasion." The requests were endless: Mother's Day, birthday, Christmas, Easter, Valentine's Day, Labor Day, Memorial Day, even Groundhog Day became an excuse. When I hesitated about buying Linda a $500 scarf for Arbor Day, she burst into tears during family dinner. "I guess some people just don't understand family loyalty," she sniffled, while Rachel patted her back. "Even after we've welcomed her so warmly." "Maya," James said later that night, "why do you have to be so difficult? They're your family now too." "But James, don't you think this is getting out of hand? Last week, your mom wanted a designer watch because it was National Ice Cream Day." He just shrugged. "If you can afford it, why not help family?" As if the situation wasn't stressful enough, Kyle, Rachel's 15-year-old son, started showing up at our apartment more frequently. At first, I tried to be understanding. All teenagers go through difficult phases, right? But Kyle took teenage attitude to new heights. One evening, I spent hours making my grandmother's special lasagna recipe. Kyle took one bite and pushed the plate away. "This is garbage," he declared. "Mom says you probably can't cook because you grew up with servants doing everything for you." I gripped my fork tighter. "Kyle, that's not appropriate." "Whatever," he cut me off. "I need $60 for the movies with my friends." When I refused, he kicked the kitchen chair. "You're loaded. Stop being such a miser. Mom says you're just playing poor to feel superior." That night, I tried talking to James about Kyle's behavior. We were getting ready for bed, and I was hoping he'd finally see reason. "Honey, Kyle was really disrespectful today. Could you maybe talk to him?" James didn't even look up from his phone. "You need to handle it yourself. Think of it as practice. We'll have our own kids someday. You need to learn how to deal with these situations." The next day, Kyle showed up again, loudly demanding money for a new video game. When I said no, he sprawled across our couch, turned the TV volume up to maximum, and started making pointed comments about fake humble rich people. I looked at my husband, hoping for support, but he just walked out of the room, leaving me alone with his smirking nephew. In that moment, standing in my own living room while a teenager openly disrespected me, I felt more alone than I ever had before. 2 years. It's amazing how much can change in 2 years. Or maybe how much you can convince yourself that things will get better if you just try hard enough, be patient enough, give enough. "I'm going to visit Mom and Dad this weekend," I told James over breakfast one morning. "Want to come?" He barely glanced up from his phone. "Can't. Promised Mom and Dad I'd help them with some stuff around the house." The drive to my parents' house was peaceful. Mom made my favorite lasagna, Dad told his terrible dad jokes, and for a few hours, I felt like myself again. Like the Maya who used to know exactly who she was and what she wanted. But life has a way of shattering peace into a million pieces. When I opened the door to our apartment Sunday evening, the stench hit me first: stale beer and pizza, and something worse. Empty cans littered every surface. Cigarette butts floated in half-empty Solo cups. Pizza boxes made a greasy tower on my coffee table. And there, sprawled across my living room like they owned it, were Kyle and 5 other teenagers, passed out among the wreckage of what had clearly been one hell of a party. "Get up," I shouted, my voice shaking with rage. "All of you, out. Now." The teenagers startled awake, scrambling to gather their things. All except Kyle, who stretched lazily and looked at me with that familiar smirk. Why should I leave? I live here now. I felt my blood pressure rising. "Excuse me?" "Had a fight with Mom and Grandma," he said, reaching for a half-empty beer can. "Decided this was better than their rules. Uncle James said I could crash here. We rent this apartment, We may have problems, I said through gritted teeth. Give me your keys. Now. Kyle laughed. Actually laughed. Rent this apartment? That's funny. This is Uncle James's apartment. Has been since great-grandpa left it to him. The room started spinning. What are you talking about? The apartment. It's his. Always has been. Got it when great-grandpa died 5 years ago. Everyone knows that. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. 2 years of rent payments. Every time I'd suggested putting the lease in my name, every time he'd dodged the question, every time he'd quickly hidden his phone when making the rent transfer. It had all been a lie. I must have looked like I was about to collapse, because Kyle's whole demeanor changed. The cocky teenager disappeared, replaced by someone who looked almost sympathetic. Look, he said, awkwardly patting my shoulder, there's something else you should know. He pulled out his phone, fidgeting with it. I'd been recording some of their conversations. Started doing it when they were talking shit about me, but, well, they talk about you a lot too. James's laugh came through the speaker first. That laugh I used to love. It's perfect, he was saying. $3,000 a month, straight into my pocket. She doesn't even question it. My stomach churned as Kyle played recording after recording. Each one worse than the last. Keep talking about family loyalty, Rachel was saying. She'll cave every time. Got a new Prada bag out of her last week. Just make sure you get her pregnant soon, Linda's voice again. Once there's a baby, her daddy will have to buy you two a house. No way he'll let his grandchild live in an apartment. But the worst was yet to come. Kyle hesitated before playing the next one. She's such an idiot, James's voice, slightly slurred. Can't even satisfy me in bed. Thank God for Amanda, and Julie. And what's her name from accounting? Just be careful, honey, Linda again. Don't let Maya catch you. At least not until we've squeezed every penny we can out of her. The phone slipped from my numb fingers. Kyle caught it. Could you? My voice cracked. Could you send those to me? He nodded, quickly tapping on his phone. I heard the notification sounds on mine as the files came through. Kyle stood up, gathering his things. At the door, he turned back. I'm sorry, he said quietly. They're all snakes, you know? Always have been, even Mom. He shrugged. Guess that's why they hate me so much. I can't pretend like they do. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving me alone in the trashed apartment. Alone with the truth about my marriage. About my husband. About the past 2 years of my life. I didn't bother cleaning up the mess in the apartment. Let it be a perfect metaphor for my marriage, a beautiful facade hiding absolute garbage underneath. Instead, I got in my car and drove straight to Linda and Tom's house, where I knew they'd all be having their Sunday family dinner. They were all there, exactly as I'd pictured them, James, Linda, Tom, and Rachel, gathered around the dining table like some Norman Rockwell painting of family unity. The scene made me sick. Maya. Linda's fake smile appeared instantly. We weren't expecting you. How was your parents' house? I ignored her completely, fixing my eyes on James. Show me the rental agreement for our apartment. The room went silent. James's fork paused halfway to his mouth. What? The rental agreement, the lease. Show it to me. He recovered quickly, plastering on that charming smile I'd once loved. Oh, honey, you know Mr. Johnson doesn't do formal contracts. We've known each other for years. Mr. Johnson doesn't exist, I cut him off. The apartment belongs to you. Always has. Linda jumped in quickly, her voice high and nervous. Maya, dear, would you like some pot roast? I tried that recipe you mentioned. Shut up, Linda. My voice was ice cold. They all stared at me in shock. I'd never spoken to any of them like that before. James, what have you been doing with my $3,000 every month for the past 2 years? He chuckled, but I could see sweat breaking out on his forehead. Come on, Maya, it's not a big deal. So I own the apartment, what difference does it make? We're married. What difference? I pulled out my phone. Let's see what difference it makes. The color drained from their faces as James's voice filled the room. It's perfect. $3,000 a month, straight into my pocket. She doesn't even question it. I played recording after recording. Their own voices condemned them. The plotting, the manipulation, the mockery. James's boasts about his mistresses. Linda and Rachel's schemes for extracting gifts. Their plans for getting me pregnant to secure more money from my father. When I finally stopped the playback, you could have heard a pin drop. James was ghost white. Rachel looked like she might throw up. Linda's carefully maintained makeup couldn't hide her terror. I'm divorcing you, I said to James, my voice steady. Expect the papers this week. If you try to contact me for anything other than the divorce proceedings, these recordings go public. I'm sure the business community would love to hear how you scammed your wife out of $72,000. I turned and walked out, their protests falling on deaf ears. I drove back to the apartment, his apartment, and packed my things methodically, efficiently. By sunset, my car was loaded, and I was on my way to my parents' house. Mom and Dad were still up when I arrived. One look at my face, and they knew something was terribly wrong. I told them everything, showing them the recordings. Dad's face grew darker with each revelation. I'll handle this, he said when I finished, and he did. James was fired the next day, and Dad made sure his reputation in the business world was thoroughly destroyed. The divorce proceedings were quick. James tried to fight it at first, but the recordings changed everything. The judge was particularly interested in the financial fraud aspect. James walked away with nothing but his apartment and his ruined reputation. 3 months later, I was back at headquarters, throwing myself into work, slowly rebuilding my life. That's when I got a text from Kyle. We met for coffee. He looked different, more mature, less angry. I got a job at the car wash, he told me. Moved out of Mom's house after they found out I was the one who gave you the recordings. Best decision I ever made. I could help you, I offered. Get you a position at the company. He shook his head, smiling slightly. Thanks, but I need to do this on my own. Clean slate, you know? Besides, I'm saving up for community college. I understood completely. Sometimes the only way forward is to leave everything behind and build something new, something true, from the ground up. That night, I stood in my new apartment, my actual rental, with a real lease in my name, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same person who fell for James's charm 2 years ago. She was stronger, wiser, and finally, genuinely free. I picked up my phone and deleted their numbers one by one. The last light of day caught the diamond on my ring finger, my grandmother's ring now, not the one James had given me, and scattered into 1,000 points of light. Outside my window, the city was coming alive with evening energy, full of possibilities and new beginnings. I was ready for mine. Growing up in a middle-class family in suburban Chicago, my life was pretty straightforward. My dad, Tom, spent 30 years on the police force before retiring, and my mom, Sarah, still works as a secretary at Lincoln Elementary. They gave me everything they could, but we were never wealthy. I'm Tasha Mitchell. Well, I was before I became Tasha Reynolds. After graduating from college with an accounting degree, I landed a job at Anderson & Partners, a mid-sized accounting firm. The pay was decent, the work was steady, and I thought that would be my life. Wake up, go to work, come home, repeat. Then came that rainy Tuesday in October when I literally bumped into Marcus outside Starbucks. I was rushing to get my morning coffee before work, and he was heading to some important meeting. My coffee spilled all over his obviously expensive suit, and I wanted to die right there. I'm so sorry, I started dabbing at his jacket with napkins. I'll pay for the dry cleaning, I swear. Instead of getting angry, he laughed. Don't worry about it. Though you could make it up to me by having dinner with me tonight. That dinner turned into another, and another. Marcus was different from anyone I'd dated before. He was the son of James and Victoria Reynolds, owners of Reynolds Industries, one of the largest manufacturing companies in the Midwest. But he never made me feel less than him. He loved that I came from a real family, as he called it. That all changed when he took me to meet his parents at their mansion in Lake Forest. I'll never forget Victoria Reynolds looking me up and down like I was something she'd found stuck to her shoe. "So, Tasha," she said, swirling her wine glass, "Marcus tells us you're an accountant?" "Yes, I am," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "How practical," she said with a thin smile. "And your parents?" When I told her about my dad being a retired cop and my mom a school secretary, you'd think I'd said they were professional criminals. James Reynolds barely looked at me during dinner, speaking only to Marcus about work. When he proposed 3 months later, I said yes without hesitation. His parents attended our wedding with frozen smiles and stiff congratulations. I thought I could win them over with time. I thought love would be enough. After our honeymoon in Bali, Marcus and I moved into his luxury apartment in downtown Chicago. The place was bigger than my parents' entire house, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. I felt like I was living in a dream. 2 months after we married, I discovered I was pregnant. Marcus was ecstatic, spinning me around our massive living room when I told him. Even Victoria and James seemed to soften a little at the news, though Victoria couldn't resist saying, "Well, at least the child will have good breeding on one side." Our son, James Jr., Marcus insisted on naming him after his father, was born on a snowy December morning. The moment I held him, nothing else mattered, not Victoria's constant criticisms, not the whispers at Reynolds Industries parties about the accountant who married the boss's son. JJ, as we called him, was perfect. Those first 2 years were actually good. Marcus took to fatherhood like a natural, coming home early to play with JJ, reading him bedtime stories, taking us both to the park on weekends. He was thriving as financial director at Reynolds Industries, and I worked part-time from home as an accountant while taking care of JJ and our home. Victoria and James might not have liked me, but they doted on their grandson, showering him with expensive gifts and demanding regular visits. But somewhere around JJ's 3rd birthday, things started to change. Marcus began coming home later and later, always with the same excuse, "Big project at work, honey." You wouldn't understand. The man who used to rush home to see his son now barely made it for bedtime. Then came that Thursday when Victoria showed up unannounced at our apartment, her Hermes scarf perfectly arranged, despite the wind outside. "Would you care to explain," she said, walking in without waiting for an invitation, "why you weren't at the company's annual gala last night?" I stared at her, confused. "What gala?" "Don't play dumb, Tasha. The Reynolds Industries anniversary gala. Every executive and their wife was there, except you." My stomach dropped. I didn't know about any gala. Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Marcus said you weren't feeling well." "Are you telling me my son lied?" I waited up that night, sitting in our dark living room until Marcus came home at 11:30. He loosened his tie as he walked in, stopping short when he saw me. "Why didn't you tell me about the gala?" I asked quietly. He sighed, pouring himself a scotch. "Look, Tasha, let's be honest. You wouldn't have fit in. You're too simple for these events. The other executives' wives, they know how to carry themselves. They can discuss art and wine and summer homes in the Hamptons. What would you talk about? Your dad's police stories? Your mom's adventures in the school cafeteria?" I felt like he'd slapped me. "I'm your wife, Marcus. You're supposed to be proud of me, not ashamed." I was proud, Tasha. When we were dating, your simplicity was charming. But I'm the financial director now. I need a wife who can be more. I went to bed crying that night, telling myself he was just stressed from work, that things would get better. But deep down, I knew something had broken between us, something I wasn't sure could be fixed. It was a Tuesday when my world fell apart. Marcus had texted that he was working late again, and I was doing my usual cleaning routine around the apartment. When I got to his home office, I noticed his laptop was open on his desk, screen still bright. I'd never snooped before, I trusted him, despite everything. But something made me pause this time. Maybe it was the way the screen showed his email was open, or maybe I was just tired of all the lies. I sat down at his desk, and that's when I saw it, an email thread with someone named Sophia Loran. My hand shook as I started reading. There were hundreds of messages between them, going back months. Sophia was apparently a new marketing executive at Reynolds Industries, hired about a year ago. As I scrolled through their correspondence, my stomach turned. Had dinner with the village idiot again, Marcus had written. God, I can't believe I have to go home to her. Sophia's response, poor baby. Don't worry, I'll make it all better tomorrow. They talked about me like I was a joke, the simple-minded wife who didn't know her husband was sleeping with someone else. There were pictures of jewelry he'd bought her, weekend trips they'd taken while he'd told me he was at business conferences. I stayed up all night, copying everything to a USB drive, printing key emails, taking screenshots. When Marcus finally came home at 7 a.m., his shirt wrinkled and his tie loose, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the evidence spread out in front of me. Care to explain? I asked, holding up one of the printed emails. How could you do this to me, to our family? He laughed, actually laughed. Come on, Tasha. Did you really think you were enough? Sophia is everything you're not, sophisticated, sexy, exciting. When's the last time you even tried to look good for me? I've been taking care of our son while you've been screwing around. Look, he said, pouring himself a coffee like we were discussing the weather, here's how this is going to work. You'll stay my wife, on paper. It's better for my image at the company. Sophia understands. And hey, he added with a nasty grin, maybe I'll even find time for you occasionally. If you're lucky. I ran to JJ's room, my hands shaking as I threw some clothes into a backpack. JJ was still sleeping, clutching his favorite teddy bear. I gently woke him up. Baby, we're going to visit Grandma and Grandpa for a while, okay? Marcus leaned against the doorframe, watching us. You'll be back. Where else could you possibly go? I picked up my son, grabbed the backpack and my purse with the USB drive, and walked past Marcus without a word. Through tears, I drove to my parents' house. Mom opened the door in her bathrobe, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. The divorce papers arrived 3 days after I left. Victoria Reynolds personally delivered them to my parents' front door, wearing a satisfied smirk. I always knew you weren't good enough for my son, she said, handing me the envelope. I'm just glad he finally realized it too. But what came next was worse than anything I'd imagined. Marcus wasn't just filing for divorce, he was suing for full custody of JJ. His lawyer filed papers claiming I was an unfit mother, painting a picture of me that was completely false. Your Honor, Marcus's expensive lawyer said during our first hearing, Mrs. Reynolds has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior over the past year. She drinks heavily, creates scenes of jealousy without cause, and has become unstable. Thank God I'd saved all that evidence. When my lawyer presented the email correspondence between Marcus and Sophia, showing his infidelity and his cruel comments about me, the judge's expression changed. The timestamps on the emails proved I hadn't been creating scenes. I hadn't even known about the affair until I found those messages. So, Mr. Reynolds, the judge said, reviewing the evidence, you claim your wife is unstable, yet these emails show you were the one deceiving her, gaslighting her? Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his expensive suit. The judge awarded me primary custody of JJ, with Marcus getting every other weekend and substantial child support payments. I went back to work full-time at my accounting firm, while Mom and Dad helped with JJ. They were amazing, turning their retirement years into full-time grandparent duty without a single complaint. We settled into a routine. It wasn't luxury living anymore, but it was honest and peaceful. Then came that Saturday morning when a black Range Rover pulled up in front of my parents' modest house. Marcus stepped out, and with him was Sophia, tall, blonde, wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "I'm here to see my son," Marcus announced, pushing past me into the house. Sophia followed, her nose wrinkled as she looked around our living room with its worn but comfortable furniture. "Oh my God," she laughed, picking up one of Mom's cherished family photos. "This place is literally a dump. Like an actual kennel." "Watch your mouth," I warned her. She turned to Marcus. "Baby, you can't let your son stay in this hovel. And these old people?" She gestured toward my parents, who stood shocked in the doorway. "They belong in a ditch somewhere, not raising a Reynolds heir." "Get out," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Both of you, get out of my parents' house right now." "Or what?" Marcus sneered. "You know what, Tasha? I'm done playing nice. I'm going to take JJ, and I'm going to destroy you. You think you won in court? Just wait." I shoved them both toward the door. "Get out." "Come on, baby," Sophia purred to Marcus. "This place probably has fleas anyway." As they drove away, I hugged my parents tight. Mom was crying, and Dad looked like he wanted to punch something. But watching that Range Rover disappear down our street, I realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. The next night, Dad found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of coffee. "You know, sweetheart," he said, sitting down across from me, "sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Remember Mike Sullivan? He worked with me on the force. Now he's a private investigator. Real thorough guy, knows how to dig deep without leaving traces." I thought about Sophia's smug face, about her cruel words about my parents, about all the nasty emails she kept sending me. Just that morning, she'd commented on my LinkedIn profile photo, "Look at this pathetic wannabe. Can't even afford decent clothes anymore?" Marcus wasn't any better. His latest email had read, "Every time I pick up JJ and see you in that dump, I remember why I upgraded. Enjoy playing poor with your cop daddy." "How much does Mike charge?" I asked Dad. 2 days later, I was sitting in a small office downtown with Mike Sullivan, a gruff man with kind eyes who'd known me since I was a kid. Weeks passed. I focused on work and JJ, trying to ignore the constant stream of harassment from Marcus and Sophia. Then Mike called. "You need to come to my office," he said. "You're going to want to see this in person." The file he handed me was thick. "First off," he said, "Sophia Loren isn't her real name. She's using her sister's identity. Her real name is Carla Larson." As I read through the file, my hands started shaking. Before working at Reynolds Industries, Sophia had been an escort, moving from rich man to rich man, living off their money until they got tired of her or discovered her small-time scams. She'd had different names in different cities, always disappearing just before things got too hot. But what she was doing at Reynolds Industries was far worse. "Look at these bank transfers," Mike pointed out. "She's been siphoning money from company accounts, small amounts that wouldn't raise red flags. And these emails?" He showed me screenshots. "She's been selling company information to your in-laws' biggest competitors. Product launches, merger plans, everything." I sat back, my mind racing. The perfect, sophisticated Sophia Loren was nothing but a con artist. And she'd gotten her hooks into not just my husband, but the entire Reynolds empire. "There's one more thing," Mike said, pulling out another folder. "Remember that big deal Reynolds Industries lost last month? The one that cost them millions? Sophia sold the bid information to their competitor 3 days before the deadline." I gathered all the evidence carefully, making multiple copies. But I didn't make a move. Not yet. Because now I knew something Sophia didn't. Timing is everything. The call from Victoria came on a Wednesday morning. Her voice was as cold as ever. "Tasha, James's 60th birthday party is this Saturday," she said, like she was scheduling a root canal. "While we'd prefer to keep this a family-only affair, JJ should be there for his grandfather's birthday. And since he's too young to come alone." She let the sentence hang there. Just remember, you're only being invited as JJ's escort. Try to stay in the background and not embarrass anyone. The party starts at 7. James Reynolds' 60th birthday party was exactly as ostentatious as you'd expect. The mansion was decked out in gold and crystal, with waiters carrying champagne on silver trays. I felt every judgmental stare as JJ and I walked in. "Oh, you came," Victoria said, her smile tight. "Well, JJ darling, come give grandmother a kiss." I stood awkwardly by the appetizer table, watching my son being paraded around like a show pony. The other guests either ignored me or whispered behind their hands. I clutched my large purse containing Mike's file, waiting. Then Marcus walked in with Sophia on his arm. She was wearing a red Valentino dress that probably cost more than my car, diamonds dripping from her ears. "Everyone," Marcus announced, clinking his glass. "I have an announcement to make." He pulled Sophia closer. "I'd like you all to meet my future wife, Sophia Loren. She'll be joining the Reynolds family officially next spring." Victoria rushed forward to embrace her. Finally, a woman worthy of the Reynolds name. Harvard educated, from a wonderful family. "Unlike some people," James added, shooting me a look. Sophia preened under their attention. "I just feel so blessed to be joining such an esteemed family. And I promise to be the kind of wife Marcus truly deserves." That was my cue. I stood up, my hand steady as I pulled out the file. "Speaking of what people deserve," I said loudly, "I have a few things to share about the future Mrs. Reynolds." "Tasha," Marcus warned, "don't make a scene." I pulled out the first document. "Tell me, Sophia, or should I say Carla Larson? How's your sister feeling about you stealing her identity?" The color drained from Sophia's face. "What is she talking about?" Victoria demanded. "Oh, did she not mention that she's been living under her sister's identity? The real Sophia Loren is a schoolteacher in Minnesota. This woman," I pointed at her, "is Carla Larson, former escort and con artist." "She's lying," Sophia shrieked, but I was already laying out the evidence, photos, bank statements, police reports. "And here's my personal favorite," I continued, pulling out more documents. "Bank transfers showing how she's been stealing from Reynolds Industries. And look at these emails, she's been selling your company's secrets to Wagner Manufacturing and Collins Corp. For months." James Reynolds snatched the papers from my hands. "The Wagner deal, the Collins merger, it was you?" "I can explain," Sophia stammered, backing away from Marcus's thunderous face. "The real Carla Larson," I said, enjoying every moment, "has quite a history. 7 different cities, 7 different wealthy men, 7 different scams. Looks like Reynolds Industries was going to be number 8. The room had gone deadly quiet. I watched their faces change as they read through the evidence, Marcus's confusion, Victoria's horror, James's growing rage. And Sophia, her perfect mask cracking as her house of cards came tumbling down. The elegant birthday party dissolved into chaos within minutes. James Reynolds's face had turned an alarming shade of purple as he read through the evidence. "Get out," he roared at Sophia, who was still trying to stammer excuses. "Get out of my house before I have you arrested right here." "James, darling," she attempted, reaching for his arm. "These are all lies, I can explain everything." "Explain?" He shook the documents at her. "Explain how you cost us the Wagner deal? That contract was worth $20 million. And Collins? They were our biggest competitor, and you've been feeding them everything." Victoria, who'd been quietly reading through the escort service records, looked up with pure venom in her eyes. "You common prostitute," she hissed. "You thought you could con your way into our family?" Sophia backed toward the door, her designer heels clicking on the marble floor. "Marcus, baby, tell them." But Marcus looked like he might be sick, staring at the photos of Sophia, or Sophie, with various wealthy men over the years. "If you're not off my property in 30 seconds, James said, his voice deadly quiet, "I'm calling the police. And trust me, you'll be seeing plenty of our lawyers either way." After Sophia fled, James turned to his son. The party guests were pretending to be absorbed in their champagne, but everyone was watching. "You brought this woman into our company," James said. "Gave her access to confidential information. All because what? She was pretty? Had nice legs?" "Dad, I didn't know." "Exactly," James roared. "You didn't know? Didn't check? Just thought with your..." He glanced at JJ and modified his language, "with everything except your brain. You're fired, Marcus. Clear out your office by tomorrow." "But Dad. And that apartment you're living in? Company property. Find somewhere else to live." Victoria, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly turned to me. "Tasha," she said, and for the first time ever, her voice held genuine emotion. "We owe you an apology. A significant one. You saved our company from God knows how much damage." James nodded solemnly. "We were wrong about you. Very wrong. You've proven yourself more worthy of the Reynolds name than..." He glanced at Marcus, others. 3 days later, Sophia was arrested at O'Hare, trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. The evidence I'd gathered, combined with what Reynolds Industries lawyers found once they started looking, was overwhelming. She was facing serious fraud charges and massive fines. Marcus, I heard, was staying at a friend's condo while he looked for a new job. No other financial firms were eager to hire a man who'd been fired for such catastrophic negligence. It's been 6 months since James Reynolds' birthday party changed everything. I'm sitting in my new apartment, not as luxurious as the one I shared with Marcus, but perfect for JJ and me. The Reynolds family gave it to me as a token of appreciation for saving their company from Sophia's schemes. "The least we could do," James had said, handing me the keys. "After everything, well, you understand. The apartment is in a nice neighborhood, close to good schools. JJ's room is decorated with superhero posters, and my little home office overlooks a park. It's not a penthouse with lake views, but it feels like home in a way the luxury apartment never did." Marcus moved to California last month. He calls JJ every Sunday at 7 p.m., like clockwork. Their conversations are short. JJ's still too young to talk long on the phone, but at least he's trying to be a father, even from a distance. He never asks to speak to me, and that's fine. Some bridges stay burned. The biggest change has been with the Reynolds family. Victoria stops by at least once a week, usually bearing gifts for JJ and, surprisingly, for me too. Last week, she brought a beautiful orchid for my windowsill. The real shock came when Victoria and James invited my parents over for dinner. I was nervous. The last time they'd all been in the same room was at my wedding, where the class divide had been palpable. But something had shifted. I watched in amazement as James asked Dad about his years on the force, genuinely interested in his stories. Victoria and Mom talked about gardening, exchanging tips about growing roses. "Sarah," Victoria said to my mom at the end of the evening, "you and Tom raised a remarkable daughter." I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner." "We always knew what Tasha was capable of," Mom replied with quiet dignity. "Sometimes it just takes others a while to catch up. Life isn't perfect. I still have days when I miss the man I thought Marcus was, when I worry about JJ growing up with a long-distance father. But then I look at my son, happy and healthy, playing with his grandparents, all his grandparents, and I know we're going to be okay." Last night, I found JJ looking at an old photo of Marcus and me from our wedding day. "Do you miss Daddy?" he asked. I sat down next to him, pulling him close. "Sometimes," I said honestly. "But you know what? Life doesn't always go the way we plan. Sometimes it goes wrong before it goes right. The important thing is to stay true to who you are." Later, as I tucked him into bed, I thought about how far we'd come. From the simple accountant the Reynolds family once scorned, to the woman who saved their company. Sometimes the happy ending isn't the one you expected. Sometimes it's better. From my earliest memories, I knew I was a disappointment. Not that my parents ever said it directly, they didn't have to. The way they looked at me when I was born, hoping for their first son, and then again when my sister Kate arrived 3 years later, told me everything I needed to know. I was Jenna, their firstborn daughter, and I would never be enough. Maybe the next one will be a boy, I overheard Mom telling Dad after Kate was born. But there wasn't going to be a next one. Complications during Kate's birth meant Mom couldn't have any more children. Their dreams of having a son were put on hold, transferred to some distant future when their daughters might give them grandsons instead. Growing up in our modest suburban home, I watched as Kate quickly figured out how to wrap our parents around her little finger. She'd bat those big brown eyes of hers, and they'd melt like ice cream on a hot summer day. Meanwhile, I grew more independent, learning to rely on myself rather than chase after attention I was never going to get. Kate knew exactly what buttons to push to get what she wanted. I had everything I needed: clothes, food, shelter, education, but emotional warmth was always in short supply, at least for me. Over time, I learned to accept it, to build my own internal fortress of self-reliance. I'm going to study economics, I announced at dinner during my senior year of high school. Mom and Dad exchanged looks across the table. Are you sure, honey? Mom asked, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. That's such a technical field. Dad nodded in agreement. What about something more suitable for a young lady? Teaching, maybe? Or nursing? I stood my ground. I've already been accepted to State University. My grades are good enough for a partial scholarship. Well, Mom sighed, I suppose it's your choice. The disappointment in her voice was familiar by now, almost comforting in its predictability. Kate, who was still in high school, smirked from across the table. I'm thinking of studying psychology, she announced, and our parents immediately brightened. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Mom exclaimed. You've always been so good with people. I pushed my peas around my plate, letting their voices wash over me like background noise. I'd learned long ago that fighting for their approval was a losing battle. Instead, I focused on my future, on the independence that college would bring. I met James during my sophomore year at State University. He was a senior in the economics department, and we literally bumped into each other in the library's financial section. I dropped my statistics textbook, he picked it up, and that's how our story began. You're in Professor Martinez's macro class, right? He asked, handing me back my book. I've seen you asking all the smart questions. I blushed, not used to anyone noticing me in a positive way. Yeah, that's me. The annoying one who keeps the class running late. Not annoying at all, he smiled. Actually, I was wondering if you'd like to grab coffee sometime? I could tell you about the upper-level courses you'll be taking next year. That coffee date turned into dinner, which turned into movie nights, which turned into us being inseparable. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen and appreciated. James didn't compare me to anyone else, he just liked me for who I was. After he graduated, James took a job at Anderson Consulting while I finished my degree. He waited for me, and the moment I graduated, we decided to move in together. We found a small apartment downtown, nothing fancy, but it was ours. Mom, Dad, this is James, I said during his first visit to my parents' house. The change in their attitude was immediate and shocking. Oh, James, Mom practically squealed. We're so happy to finally meet you. Will you be joining us for Thanksgiving? Christmas, both? Dad clapped him on the shoulder. Son, we've heard so much about you. Tell me about your job. Jenna says you're in finance? The word son caught my attention. Of course, they were finally getting the son they'd always wanted, even if it was through marriage. I watched as they fawned over James, asking him about his plans for the future and when he thought he might want to settle down. Kate, who was living at home after graduating and still hadn't found a serious boyfriend, sat in the corner during these family gatherings, shooting daggers at us with her eyes. For once, I was the sister who had something she wanted, and she couldn't stand it. After a year of living together, during a quiet dinner at home, James got down on one knee and proposed. I said yes immediately, and we decided on a small, intimate wedding, despite my parents' protests about wanting something more elaborate. "It's your big day," Mom argued. "Don't you want something more special?" "This is special," I insisted. "It's exactly what we want." The ceremony was perfect, just close friends and family in a small garden venue. James and I exchanged vows, had a lovely dinner reception, and went back to our apartment as husband and wife. It felt right, starting our married life in the same place where we'd begun building our life together. The questions started almost immediately after the honeymoon. "So, when can we expect some good news?" Mom would ask, her eyes gleaming with barely concealed desperation for a grandson. "We're saving for a house first," I'd explain, again and again. "We want to be financially stable before starting a family." Dad would shake his head disapprovingly. "Your mother and I didn't have much when we started out, and we managed just fine." Every family dinner became an update on their friends' growing families. "Did you hear? The Hendersons just became grandparents again, another boy," or "the Smiths' daughter just announced she's pregnant, and she's younger than you, Jenna." Finally, after 2 years of saving, James and I bought our first house. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was ours, well, ours and the bank's. The moment we signed those mortgage papers, I knew the baby questions would intensify. And they did. What I hadn't expected was Kate's announcement just 3 months later. "I'm pregnant," she declared during Sunday dinner, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "It's Mark's." Mark was her boyfriend of 6 months, a guy none of us particularly liked. The next few months were a whirlwind. Mark disappeared as soon as Kate started showing, leaving her alone and moving back in with our parents. But instead of this being a scandal or shame, my parents transformed their house into a shrine to their upcoming grandchild. When little Emily was born, you'd have thought she was royalty. My parents converted Kate's old room into a nursery, bought every baby item imaginable, and basically turned their lives upside down to help raise their granddaughter. "Isn't she perfect?" Mom would coo, rocking Emily during our visits. "Don't you just want one of your own, Jenna?" What hurt more than my parents' constant pressure was watching James with Emily. He'd get down on the floor to play with her, make silly faces, and spend hours entertaining her with stuffed animals and children's books. "James is such a natural with children," Mom would say pointedly. "He's going to make such a wonderful father." I started monitoring my cycle, taking vitamins, and doing everything the pregnancy websites recommended. Month after month, we tried. And month after month, nothing happened. Meanwhile, James spent more and more time at my parents' house, playing with Emily. "She's such a sweet kid," he'd say on our drives home. "Did you see how she's starting to walk now? And she almost said uncle today." "You're so good with her," my mother would praise him. "Just imagine how wonderful you'll be with your own children." I'd smile and nod, but inside, a knot of anxiety was growing. Why wasn't I pregnant yet? What if something was wrong? But I pushed these thoughts aside, telling myself it would happen when it was meant to happen. After a year of trying with no success, I was still trying to stay positive. These things take time, I'd tell myself. But when Mom found out we'd been actively trying for a year, she went into full panic mode. "A whole year? Jenna, something's wrong. You need to see a doctor immediately." She started forwarding me contact information for fertility specialists before I'd even left their house that day. Finally, to get everyone off my back, I made an appointment. James came with me, holding my hand in the sterile exam room as the doctor ran through her questions. Blood tests, ultrasounds, and more tests followed. Then came the day of the results. "I'm sorry," the doctor said gently, "but the tests indicate that you're infertile." The words hit me like a physical blow. James squeezed my hand, but I barely felt it. The doctor kept talking about options and treatments, but her voice seemed to come from very far away. That evening, James and I sat in our kitchen, barely touching our takeout dinner. "We can look into adoption or IVF," he said finally. "There are options." I nodded numbly, but the devastation felt complete. How could I face my family with this news? The answer came at the next family dinner. I decided to just get it over with, like ripping off a band-aid. "Mom, Dad," I said during a lull in the conversation, "I need to tell you something. I saw a specialist and I took a deep breath. I can't have children. I'm infertile." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Mom's face contorted with disgust. "Infertile?" She spat the word like it was poison. "What kind of woman can't even do the one thing she's meant to do?" Dad wouldn't even look at me. "An empty vessel," he muttered. "Just an empty flower." Kate sat there smirking, bouncing Emily on her knee. "Well, I guess we know who the real woman in the family is." I looked at James, desperate for support, but he just sat there, staring at his plate. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. I pushed back from the table and ran out of the house, ignoring their calls behind me. After that night, I couldn't bring myself to go back to their house. But James kept going, spending time with Emily, chatting with Kate, listening to my parents. He'd come home full of stories. "Emily learned a new song today," he'd say. "You should have seen her dancing around the living room." Or, "Kate made this amazing lasagna. She's really getting good at cooking." Each word felt like a knife in my heart. I'd lie awake at night, listening to James's steady breathing beside me, wondering if he resented me for not being able to give him children. The guilt ate at me constantly, made worse every time he came home from another visit to my parents' house, with that wistful look in his eyes after playing with Emily. It was a regular Tuesday when my world fell apart. I came home early from work, my arms full of Chinese takeout, James's favorite. But the house was empty and dark. His car wasn't in the driveway, which wasn't unusual, but something felt off. I called his cell. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. Then my phone buzzed, a notification from Instagram. Kate Thompson posted a new photo. I usually ignored her posts, but something made me click this time. My stomach dropped as the image loaded, James sitting on my parents' couch, Emily in his lap, and Kate pressed against his side, all three of them grinning at the camera. The caption read, "Family time with my favorite people." My hands were shaking as I grabbed my car keys. The rational part of my brain tried to argue that there could be an innocent explanation, but my gut knew better. The whole drive to my parents' house, my mind raced through every interaction between James and Kate over the past year, seeing them in a horrible new light. Their driveway was full, Mom's car, Dad's truck, James's sedan. The front door was unlocked, as always. I slipped inside quietly, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. Voices drifted from the living room. "James, you know we think of you as a son already," my mother was saying. "And you deserve to be happy. You've been so wonderful with Emily," my father added. "And Kate, well, she's young, fertile. You could have more children together. Think about it," my mother continued. "Why stay trapped in a marriage with—" She lowered her voice, but I could still hear the disgust. "A barren woman?" I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. I burst into the room, making them all jump. The scene was like something from a nightmare, my parents and sister on one couch, James in Dad's armchair, Emily playing with blocks on the floor between them. One big happy family, plotting to exclude me. "What the hell is going on here?" My voice came out stronger than I felt. James at least had the decency to look ashamed, but my parents were defiant. "Jenna," Mom stood up, chin raised. "We're just having an honest discussion about what's best for everyone." "Best for everyone?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "You're trying to convince my husband to leave me for my sister." "Well, someone has to think about James's future," Dad shot back. "You can't give him what he wants, what he deserves. Kate can." I turned to James, waiting for him to defend our marriage, to tell them they were crazy. Instead, he stared at the floor. "James?" My voice cracked on his name. "I'm sorry, Jenna," he said quietly. "But they're right. I want children, a family. And I've developed feelings for Kate." Kate smirked, reaching out to put her hand on James's arm. "Get out," You don't belong here anymore. This is my family now." I looked at each of their faces, my father's stern disapproval, my mother's cold satisfaction, Kate's triumphant smile, James's guilty avoidance. For years of marriage, a lifetime of family ties, all meaningless. Without another word, I turned and walked out. I drove home in a daze, packed a suitcase on autopilot, and left a note for James: "File for divorce. I'll have my lawyer contact yours." The divorce was quick and clinical. We split everything down the middle. I found a small apartment across town and threw myself into my work, trying to forget. But social media had other plans. One morning, my coworker gasped at her phone during coffee break. "Oh my God, Jenna, I'm so sorry, I forgot to unfollow your sister." She tried to hide her screen, but I'd already seen it: Kate in a massive white dress, James in a tux, my parents beaming beside them. "It's fine," I said, even though it wasn't. "I hope they're very happy together." A year later, another announcement popped up: "Welcome baby Rose." My replacement had produced the daughter they'd always wanted. James now had his perfect little family, Emily, who he'd adopted, and his new baby with Kate. I deleted all my social media accounts that day. Life has a funny way of surprising you, though. I was shopping for groceries one Saturday when my cart collided with someone else's. "I am so sorry," a deep voice said. I looked up into the kindest brown eyes I'd ever seen. "I'm Michael," he said, helping me pick up my scattered items. "Can I buy you coffee to apologize for being a klutz?" One coffee turned into dinner, dinner into dating, and suddenly I was falling in love again. But this time, I was honest from the start. "I need to tell you something," I said one night, 6 months into our relationship. "I can't have children. I'm infertile." Michael took my hands in his. "Jenna, I love you. If we want kids someday, we'll adopt. Or we won't. I just want you." We got married in a small ceremony at the courthouse, just us and a few close friends. No family drama, no expensive dress, no expectations, just love. A year into our marriage, I started feeling strange. Nauseous in the mornings, dizzy at odd times. Michael insisted I see a doctor. "Mrs. Chen," the doctor said, looking at my test results. "Congratulations, you're pregnant." I stared at her. "That's impossible. I'm infertile, I have the tests to prove it." She smiled gently. "The human body is mysterious. Sometimes, despite all odds, pregnancy occurs even in cases of diagnosed infertility. It's rare, but it happens." Michael and I cried together that night, tears of joy, of disbelief, of hope. I didn't tell my family. They'd lost the right to share in my happiness. 9 months later, I held my son in my arms. 7 pounds, 6 ounces of perfect, beautiful boy. Michael and I named him Alexander, defender of mankind. Looking at his tiny face, I felt nothing but pure love. No bitterness, no regret, no anger. Life had settled into a beautiful rhythm. Alexander was 2, Michael was the perfect father, and I had everything I'd ever wanted. We rarely ate out, preferring quiet family dinners at home, but that night Michael had gotten a promotion, so we decided to celebrate at La Maison, an upscale French restaurant downtown. That's when I saw them. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But no, there was Kate, my sister, locked in an intimate embrace with a man who definitely wasn't James. They were tucked away in a corner booth, but not well enough hidden. She was running her fingers through his hair, kissing him deeply, completely oblivious to the world around them. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone and discreetly took several photos. The lighting was dim, but the pictures were clear enough, there was no mistaking what was happening. "Jenna?" Michael touched my arm. "Are you okay? You've gone pale." I showed him the photos. "That's Kate. With someone who isn't her husband." Michael's jaw tightened. He knew our whole history, knew what Kate and James had done to me. "Are you going to send those to him?" My finger hovered over the send button. It would be so easy. One click and I could blow up their perfect little family, just like they'd blown up mine. But no, I said finally, saving the photos to a secure folder instead. I'm better than them. A year passed. Alexander was growing into a brilliant, beautiful little boy with Michael's kind eyes and my stubborn chin. We were visiting a friend who lived in my old neighborhood, something I rarely did, and decided to take advantage of the nice weather by walking to a nearby park. That's when it happened. Just our luck, as we rounded the corner by the local supermarket, there they were, Mom, Dad, Kate, and James, loading groceries into their car. They saw us at the same moment we saw them. Their initial reaction was to turn away, noses in the air, pretending we were strangers. But then their eyes fell on Alexander, who was holding my hand and chattering away about the toy truck he'd brought to play with at the park. Mom stopped dead in her tracks. Who is this? I could have ignored them. Should have, probably. But something made me stop. This is my son, Alexander. My voice was steady, calm. Kate let out a harsh laugh. Oh please. We all know you can't have children. Which agency did you adopt him from? I looked her straight in the eye, enjoying the moment. I gave birth to him 3 years ago. No adoption agency involved. That's impossible, Mom sputtered. The doctors said. The doctors were wrong, I cut her off. It happens sometimes. Rare, but it happens. And here's the proof. I gestured to Alexander, who was watching the strangers curiously. Dad's eyes went wide. A grandson? We have a grandson? They moved toward us then, Mom's arms outstretched like she had every right in the world to embrace my child. I stepped in front of Alexander, protectively. No, I said firmly. You don't get to do this. You don't get to throw me away like garbage and then claim my son as your grandson. You lost that privilege when you betrayed me. Kate's face had turned an ugly shade of red as she watched our parents' attention focus on my son. She'd always been the favorite after I was cast aside, and she couldn't stand seeing that shift. Oh, get over yourself, Jenna, she spat. So you managed to pop out one kid. Big deal. I still won in the end. I got your husband, I gave him a real family. 2 beautiful daughters. Face it, I'm still better than you'll ever be. My hand was already on my phone before she finished her rant. Speaking of family, Kate, why don't you tell everyone about your extracurricular activities? What are you talking about? James asked, his eyes narrowing. I pulled up the photos from the restaurant and held out my phone. Here's your loving wife having dinner with someone else. Though I have to say, Kate, most people don't eat their dinner companion's face. The color drained from Kate's face as James snatched the phone from my hand. Mom and Dad crowded around to look, their mouths falling open in shock. Who is he? James demanded, his voice shaking with rage. Kate stammered, he's just a friend from work. Friends don't kiss like that, I observed coolly. And they certainly don't meet in dark corners of expensive restaurants while their spouses are at home with the kids. Kate, how could you? Mom gasped. After everything. Everything what? I couldn't help but laugh. After you helped her steal my husband? After you threw me away because you thought I couldn't have children? Karma's quite something, isn't it? James and Kate were now screaming at each other right there in the parking lot. Come on, sweetie, I said to Alexander, taking his hand. Time to go home. We left them to their chaos, my son chattering happily about the park we were heading to, completely oblivious to the nuclear explosion we'd just walked away from. A month later, the community grapevine brought me the rest of the story. James, suspicious after discovering Kate's affair, had gotten himself tested. Turned out he was the one who was infertile, had been all along. Which meant baby Rose, the daughter Kate claimed was his, couldn't possibly be. He left her immediately, refusing to pay support for either Rose or Emily. Kate moved back in with our parents, her perfect life in shambles. They all tried reaching out to me after that, calls, emails, even showing up at our house unannounced. Please, Jenna, Mom begged through the door. We made a terrible mistake. Let us be part of Alexander's life. He's our only grandson. You should have thought about that before you called me an empty vessel, I replied calmly. Actions have consequences. Michael supported my decision completely. Family isn't about DNA, he said one night as we watched Alexander playing with his blocks. It's about love, respect, and loyalty. They showed you none of those things. He was right, of course. Looking at my little family now, my wonderful husband who loved me regardless of whether I could have children, my miracle son who proved all the doctors wrong, our home filled with laughter and joy, I knew I had everything I needed. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to have. Sometimes you have to build your own, with people who choose you back. I chose Michael, and he chose me. We chose Alexander, and he chose us right back with his first smile, his first word, his first steps. That's what real family means. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I remember my childhood as a time of contrasts. While most kids complained about their parents working too much, I had to listen to my mom's daily litany about how she hated her job. Every evening was the same. She'd come home from the accounting firm, throw her bag on the kitchen counter, and start venting. Amanda, you won't believe what my boss said today, she'd begin, barely taking off her coat. He had the nerve to question my quarterly reports. Me, I'd been doing this job for 15 years. I was only 10 at the time, but even then, I could see how different my parents were. Dad, who managed a retail chain, would just shake his head and keep eating his dinner. He was always the practical one. Sarah, he'd say to Mom, using his calm voice that somehow made her even more agitated, if you hate it so much, find another job. Another job? She'd scoff. I don't want another job, Mark. I want no job. I want to be home, living the life I deserve. Dad would usually chuckle at this point, which never failed to send Mom into a fresh spiral of complaints. You think it's funny? You think it's amusing that your wife is miserable? I learned to tune out these conversations, focusing instead on whatever book I was reading or homework I had to finish. But everything changed when we got that call about Uncle Jerry. I still remember that evening clearly. Dad was unusually quiet during dinner, and Mom was going through her usual routine of complaints when he finally interrupted her. Jerry died, he said simply, putting down his fork. Mom stopped mid-sentence. Your Uncle Jerry? Was there, did he leave anything? Dad sighed heavily. He left his estate to his nephews. I'm one of them. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. How much? $200,000. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my mother's face transform, the perpetual frown lines smoothed out, her eyes widened, and a smile I'd never seen before spread across her face. Mark, she whispered, reaching across the table to grab his hand, do you know what this means? We could buy that vacation house I've been talking about, or... No, Dad cut her off firmly. Remember all those times you said you wanted to be free? Well, here's our chance. I'm going to start my own business. A business? Mom's voice rose an octave. But Mark... A courier company, he continued as if she hadn't spoken. I'd been researching it for years. With this capital, we could make it work. You could quit your job and help me run it. We'd be our own bosses. Mom's face went through a series of expressions, disappointment, calculation, and finally, resignation mixed with hope. Fine, she said eventually. But I get to be the accountant. And when we start making money, I want nice things, Mark. Real nice things. Dad smiled and squeezed her hand. Deal. The first 3 years were tough. Dad worked crazy hours getting his courier company off the ground, while Mom handled the books. I spent a lot of time at the office after school, watching them build something from nothing. Despite the long hours, there was an energy in the air, a sense of possibility that made even the difficult days feel worthwhile. Then, almost exactly 3 years in, everything changed. The business started turning real profit, and suddenly we were living a completely different life. We moved from our modest house to a fancy new place in the expensive part of town. Dad bought 2 Mercedes for himself and Mom. But the biggest change wasn't in our surroundings, it was in my mother. "I'm done," she announced one morning over breakfast. "Mark, I'm quitting the company. I don't want to work anymore." Dad just nodded, like he'd been expecting this. "Okay, honey. We can hire another accountant." I nearly choked on my cereal. "Just like that?" "Just like that," Mom smiled, already scrolling through her phone. "Oh look, Melissa just got back from Paris. I should call her." Melissa was one of Mom's new friends, all wealthy businesswomen who spent their days shopping and planning their next vacation. Her old friends, the ones who'd been around when we were normal, started disappearing from her life one by one. While Mom was reinventing herself, I started spending more time with Dad at the office. I tried to learn about the business, thinking maybe I'd take over someday, but my heart wasn't in it. "Dad," I said one afternoon, watching him review delivery routes, "what if I told you I don't want to run the company when I grow up? I think I want to be a dentist." Instead of looking disappointed, his face lit up. "Really? Tell me more about that." So I did. I told him about the biology classes I loved, about how fascinating I found dental procedures, about my dream of having my own practice someday. He listened to everything, asking questions, and showing genuine interest. Meanwhile, Mom was barely home anymore. She was always off somewhere, Aspen, Cabo, the Maldives, with her new friends. I lost count of how many times I asked to go with her. "Mom, can I come on your trip to Europe next month?" I asked one day, watching her pack another new suitcase. She didn't even look up. "Oh honey, no. These trips are my time to get away from, well, everything. When you're older, you'll realize how exhausting family life can be." I wanted to point out that she didn't actually participate in family life anymore, she was too busy recovering from it. But I just walked away. What was the point? The mother who used to help me with homework and make chocolate chip pancakes on Sundays was gone, replaced by this stranger who cared more about her designer handbags than her daughter. High school graduation came and went, and before I knew it, I was packing my bags for dental school in another state. Dad helped me move into my dorm, setting up my room with the same careful attention he gave to everything in his life. Mom didn't come to help me move in. She was in the Bahamas with her friends, celebrating someone's new yacht. Every Sunday at 7 p.m., I'd call home. Dad would appear on screen immediately, eager to hear about my classes, my friends, my life. He'd lean in close to the camera, hanging on every word about dental procedures and anatomy lessons. Mom, when she bothered to join the calls, would hover in the background, usually scrolling through her phone. It became our routine. Sometimes Mom wouldn't show up at all, and those were actually my favorite calls, just Dad and me, talking about everything and nothing. Then came the call that changed everything. "Amanda," Dad's voice was different that Sunday. "I need to tell you something." I knew from his tone that whatever was coming wasn't good. But nothing could have prepared me for what he said next. "It's cancer. And it's aggressive." The world tilted on its axis. "What? No, that's impossible. You're healthy, you." 6 months, maybe less, he cut me off gently. "I'm selling the company. Neither you nor your mother could run it, and I want everything settled before." He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Those 6 months were a blur. I tried to split my time between school and home, watching helplessly as my father, my rock, my best friend, withered away before my eyes. He sold the company quickly, thank God, so at least he didn't have to worry about that in his final weeks. Mom fluttered around during his illness, playing the part of the devoted wife whenever anyone was watching. But I caught the calculating look she'd give his medication schedule, the way she'd check his business papers when she thought no one was looking. A month after selling the company, Dad slipped away quietly in his sleep. I was holding his hand when it happened. Mom was at a spa. The funeral was a production worthy of Broadway. Mom sobbed dramatically, clutching at the arms of her friends, barely able to stand. She looked the perfect picture of a grieving widow in her designer black dress and tastefully subtle makeup. But the moment the last guest left, it was like someone had flipped a switch. She straightened up, wiped her eyes, and walked to the mirror to fix her mascara. "Well," she said, suddenly businesslike, "that's done. Now we need to talk about the money." I stared at her, unable to process the transformation. "Mom, Dad just died." "I know, honey, and it's terrible," she said, not sounding terrible at all. "But life goes on. And just think what we could do with the money from the company sale. I've had my eye on this gorgeous villa in Spain." Then there was the reading of the will. The notary's office was cold and sterile, nothing like Dad's warm presence. Mom sat next to me in a black designer dress, different from the funeral one, of course, tapping her manicured nails against her leather handbag. Mr. Peterson, Dad's longtime lawyer and friend, cleared his throat and began reading. Being of sound mind, his voice droned on with the legal preliminaries until he got to the meat of it. "The family house is to be divided equally between my wife, Sarah Thompson, and my daughter, Amanda Thompson." Mom's tapping stopped. "Furthermore, I have established a trust fund for Amanda's continued education in dentistry, covering all expenses until the completion of her degree." I could feel Mom's tension building beside me. "The remaining assets, including proceeds from the sale of the business, are to be divided as follows: 60% to my daughter, Amanda Thompson, and 40% to my wife, Sarah Thompson." The tapping resumed, faster now, almost violent. "This is ridiculous," Mom burst out before Mr. Peterson could continue. "There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Peterson said quietly. Mark was very clear about his wishes. Mom turned to me, her face a mask of calculated sympathy. "Amanda, honey, you have to see how unfair this is. Your education is already being paid for, and you'll make plenty of money once you're a dentist. I'm your mother, I need this money to maintain my lifestyle. Maybe try spending less?" The words came out before I could stop them. Her face transformed instantly, the sympathetic mask dropping away to reveal raw fury. "How dare you? After everything I've sacrificed for you?" "What exactly have you sacrificed, Mom? You haven't worked in years. You've been on permanent vacation while Dad built everything we have. I don't have to listen to this." She stood up, gathering her designer purse and jacket. "When you decide to stop being selfish and ungrateful, you know where to find me." The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the diplomas on Mr. Peterson's wall. "Your father knew this might happen," Mr. Peterson said gently. "He wanted to make sure you were taken care of." Days turned into weeks. No calls, no texts, no emails. The silence was deafening, but also strangely peaceful. I threw myself into my studies, trying to make Dad proud, trying not to think about Mom's reaction or what it said about her, about us. "She'll get over it," I told myself as I reviewed dental anatomy charts late at night. "She'll calm down eventually." But deep down, I knew something had broken in that notary's office, something that had been cracking for years. And unlike the broken bones and damaged teeth I was learning to fix in school, this wasn't something that could be mended with study or skill or science. One day I was taking a study break, mindlessly scrolling through social media, when I saw it. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was looking at: Mom, tanned and glowing, wrapped in the arms of a man who couldn't be more than 35. The caption beneath the photo stopped my heart: "Finally married to my soulmate. Newlyweds, love wins." My phone slipped from my numb fingers. Married? Without telling me? I tried calling her immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hit the right numbers. Straight to voicemail, of course. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of them together kept playing in my head, along with 1,000 questions. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I packed a small bag and caught the first flight home. The house looked exactly the same as when I'd left it after the funeral, Dad's rosebushes still perfectly trimmed, his favorite chair visible through the living room window. The only difference was the shiny red Porsche in the driveway that definitely hadn't been there before. Mom opened the door wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before. Her surprised expression quickly turned to anger. "Amanda, what are you doing here?" Her voice was ice cold. "I saw your post," I managed to say. "You got married?" "No one invited you here," she snapped, but before she could close the door, a man appeared behind her, the one from the photo. Up close, he looked even younger. "Babe, who is it?" he asked, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Nobody important," Mom replied. "Just my daughter who doesn't know how to call before showing up." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Your daughter who didn't even know you got married?" "My personal life is none of your business," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "None of my... Mom, Dad's only been gone 3 months." She laughed then, a harsh sound that held no humor. "Oh, sweetie, Brad and I have known each other for years. Why do you think I took all those solo vacations? Those trips were boring. Brad made them very interesting, didn't you, darling?" He smirked, pulling her closer. I felt sick. "How could you do this to Dad?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Your father was boring," she shot back. "Always work, work, work. Brad knows how to have fun. Now, I suggest you leave before I call the police. This is my house now, and you're not welcome here." "This is half my house," I reminded her. "Dad left it to both of us." "Get out," she screamed, her composed facade cracking. "Get out of my house. Go back to your precious studies and your perfect little life that your father bought you." I backed away, tears blurring my vision. The last thing I saw before the door slammed was Brad pulling Mom into a kiss, both of them laughing. I made it to my rental car before the sobs came. All those trips, all those times she said she needed breaks from the family. How long had she been living this double life? How long had she been betraying Dad, betraying all of us? Another month has passed. I was in the middle of a dental anatomy class when my phone buzzed. Mrs. Jenkins, our old neighbor who'd lived next door for 15 years, was calling. Odd, she never called. "Amanda, honey," her voice was hesitant. "I thought you should know, there are moving trucks at your house. Your mother is selling it." The words didn't make sense at first. "That's impossible. The house is half mine." "Well, there's a sold sign in the yard, and they're clearing everything out." My hands were shaking as I dialed Mom's number, expecting the usual silence. To my surprise, she answered on the first ring. Well, if it isn't my studious daughter." Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "Mom, what's this about selling the house?" She laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, that. Yes, Brad and I got a fantastic price for it. We're moving to Mexico, the weather's so much better there." "You can't sell the house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's half mine. Dad left it to both of us." "Funny thing about that," she said, sounding almost gleeful. "It turns out it's pretty easy to forge a signature. Just a few practice runs, and voila. The house is sold." The world tilted sideways. You forged my signature?" "Mom, that's fraud. That's a crime." "Oh please," she scoffed. "If you hadn't been so selfish with your father's money, I wouldn't have had to do this. Brad and I deserve to enjoy life. Speaking of which, I just bought him the most gorgeous Jaguar. He's so happy with it." "He's happy with your money, Mom. That's all he cares about." "You little brat," she spat. "You're just jealous, because I have a gorgeous young husband who adores me, while you're all alone with your boring books and your little dental tools. What do you know about love?" "I know Dad loved you," I said quietly. "He loved you for 30 years, and this is how you repay him?" "Your father?" She laughed again, harsher this time. "Your precious father, who left you more money than me. Who treated me like I was some kind of trophy wife. Well, now I have a real trophy, a young, handsome husband who knows how to have fun. And guess what? We don't care about your American laws in Mexico. We don't care about you or your inheritance or anything else. We're going to live the life I deserve. Mom, please. Face it, Amanda. You're just a sad, lonely little girl who's jealous of her mother's happiness. When was the last time you even had a date? Too busy playing with teeth to have a real life, aren't you? Before I could respond, the line went dead. I sat there in the empty classroom, my phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. My mother had just admitted to committing fraud. She had stolen my inheritance, my home, everything I had left of Dad. And she was proud of it. Life has a funny way of moving forward, with or without you. In the years following Mom's disappearance to Mexico, I finished dental school, completed my residency, and started working at a respected clinic. Dad's inheritance helped me buy a beautiful apartment in a quiet neighborhood, and I was building the life I'd always dreamed of. I thought about Mom sometimes, usually late at night when I couldn't sleep. I wondered if she was happy with her choices, if her young husband was worth destroying her family for. But mostly, I tried not to think about her at all. Then one ordinary Tuesday evening, as I was unwinding after a long day at the clinic, my doorbell rang. I wasn't prepared for what I saw through the peephole. There stood my mother, but not the perfectly coiffed, designer-clad woman I remembered. This woman was haggard, wearing wrinkled clothes that had seen better days. Her once immaculate hair was graying at the roots, and her expensive makeup was nowhere to be seen. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "Amanda," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "Baby, please. What are you doing here?" My voice came out harder than I expected. She pushed past me into the apartment, her eyes darting around desperately. "I need your help, Brad, she choked back a sob. "He took everything." "Everything?" I couldn't help the hint of satisfaction in my voice. "All the money, the house money, what was left of the inheritance. He spent it all on gambling and parties in Mexico. And then..." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Then he met some 20-year-old at a club. They ran off together. Took the Jaguar, took what little money was left." I stood there, watching her cry, feeling nothing but satisfaction. "I used my last dollars to fly back here," she continued. "Amanda, I know I made mistakes, but I'm your mother. Let me stay here with you, please." A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me, surprising us both. "Stay here? With me? Why are you laughing?" Her face darkened. "This isn't funny. I have nowhere else to go." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you forged my signature and stole my house," I said, my laughter dying away. "I was wrong," she wailed, falling onto my couch. "I know that now. I'm sorry. Please, Amanda, I'm your mother." "No," I said quietly. "You stopped being my mother the day Dad died. Maybe even before that. I want you to leave." She shot to her feet, tears instantly replaced by rage. "You ungrateful little bitch. After everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done to me," I corrected. "Now get out." "You can't do this to me," she screamed, mascara running down her cheeks. "I'll tell everyone what a horrible daughter you are. I'll tell them how you left your poor mother homeless. What will your fancy doctor friends think about that?" As my mother's threats echoed through my apartment, I calmly pulled out my phone. Sometimes the best weapons aren't weapons at all, they're just the truth, preserved at the right moment. "Before you continue with your threats," I said quietly, "there's something you should hear." I pressed play, and her own voice filled the room, younger, more confident, dripping with that familiar mockery from years ago. "Oh please. If you hadn't been so selfish with your father's money, I wouldn't have had to do this. It turns out it's pretty easy to forge a signature. Just a few practice runs, and voila. The house is sold." The color drained from my mother's face as she listened to her past self confess to fraud. Her legs gave out, and she sank back onto my couch. You recorded that call?" Dad taught me to always be prepared, I said, stopping the playback. He also taught me about consequences, something you never seem to understand. You wouldn't, she whispered, but the uncertainty in her voice was clear. Wouldn't I? Fraud is a federal crime, Mom. Forging documents for financial gain? That's years in prison. I'm sure the police would be very interested in this recording. She stared at me, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. Not manipulation, not calculation, genuine fear. I'll leave, she said quickly. I'll go. Just, don't. Don't what? Turn you in? Like you were just threatening to turn everyone against me? I leaned closer. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out that door, and you're never going to contact me again. No calls, no visits, no messages through friends. If I ever hear from you again, this recording goes straight to the FBI. She stood on shaky legs, clutching her worn purse to her chest. At the door, she turned back one last time. Amanda, I'm still your mother. No, I said softly. You're just a woman who gave birth to me. My mother died a long time ago, probably around the time she started cheating on my father at those resorts. She flinched as if I'd slapped her, then hurried out the door. I stood there for a long time after she left, listening to the silence of my apartment. Then I walked to my bedroom and pulled out an old photo album, one of the few things I'd managed to save before she sold the house. There was a picture of us from when I was little, Mom, Dad, and me at the beach, all smiling, all happy. I touched Dad's face gently. I miss you, I whispered. Then I closed the album and put it away. I don't know what happened to my mother after that day. I don't know if she found somewhere to live, if she ever rebuilt her life, if she ever truly regretted what she'd done. Sometimes people ask about her, and I simply say we're not in touch. The truth is, I don't want to know. The woman in that photo album, the mother who once loved me, is gone. The stranger who showed up at my door that day? She's not my problem anymore. My name is Tiffany Mitchell, and I was born into what seemed like a typical middle-class family in a quiet suburban neighborhood. My parents, David and Sarah Mitchell, were absolutely obsessed with child development techniques and early learning methods. They had stacks of parenting books everywhere in our house, and Mom was always talking about some new theory she'd read about. Sarah, don't you think we're overdoing it a bit? I remember my dad asking one evening as Mom struggled to teach me simple arithmetic. I was barely 3. No, David, these are crucial developmental years, Mom insisted, showing him yet another colorful flashcard. The books say we need to start early. Looking back now, I can't help but laugh at how ordinary my development was, despite their tireless efforts. I sat up, walked, and talked right on schedule, no prodigy here. But instead of accepting that every child develops at their own pace, my parents saw me as their first failed experiment. Everything changed when my sister Jessica was born. I was 3 years old, and suddenly our house transformed into what felt like a baby genius boot camp. Mom had even taken special courses by then, determined not to make the same mistakes she thought she'd made with me. The difference in how they approached raising Jessica was stark. Where I had regular toys, Jessica had educational development tools. Where I had picture books, Jessica had cognitive enhancement materials. Every milestone became a celebration. Her first words came early, she walked before her peers, and she could solve puzzles meant for older kids. My grandparents, Peter and Eleanor Mitchell, lived just a few blocks away, and their house became my sanctuary. They treated Jessica and me exactly the same, showering us both with the same love and attention. I remember one particular Sunday afternoon when I was about 5, sitting on Grandma Eleanor's lap as she read stories to both Jessica and me. Both of my granddaughters are perfect just the way they are, Grandma would say, giving us each a cookie. This always seemed to irritate Mom, who would purse her lips and mutter something about acknowledging exceptional talent. Sarah, Grandma once said firmly during a family dinner, children need love, not pressure. They're not science experiments. Mom, you don't understand modern parenting, Dad jumped to Mom's defense. Jessica shows real promise. We need to nurture that. I sat there, pushing peas around my plate, already understanding that in my parents' eyes, I was just the practice run, the rough draft before they created their masterpiece. Elementary school was a pretty normal experience for me. I wasn't at the top of my class, but I wasn't at the bottom either. I made friends, did my homework, and generally enjoyed being a regular kid. My report cards were filled with B's and the occasional A, which I thought was perfectly fine. My parents, however, barely glanced at them. Then came the day Jessica started school. But unlike me, who went to our local public school, my sister got a different treatment entirely. We've enrolled Jessica in the Wellington Academy for Gifted Children, Mom announced proudly at dinner one evening. They rarely accept children so young, but they were very impressed with her test scores. I remember choking on my milk. Wellington was that fancy private school across town, the one with the huge campus and Olympic-sized swimming pool. The tuition there cost more than a car. The spending didn't stop there. Every time Jessica complained about the workload or threw a tantrum about homework, our parents' solution was to throw money at the problem. I don't want to do math today, Jessica would whine. It's too hard. Tell you what, sweetie, Mom would say. If you finish your homework, we can go to the toy store and get that new dollhouse you wanted. It didn't take long for Jessica to figure out this game. Soon, every minor accomplishment came with a price tag. If I get an A on this test, can I get the new iPad, or I'll do extra credit if you buy me those designer shoes. Meanwhile, I sat at our kitchen table, doing my homework alone. No rewards, no special attention. Once, I got the highest score in my class on a science project, a solar system model I spent weeks building. When I showed it to Mom, she just nodded and said, "That's nice, honey." Oh, did you hear? Jessica got accepted into the advanced mathematics program. The final straw came when I was 13. I had just finished decorating my room, the bigger of the two kids' bedrooms, with posters of my favorite bands and some photos of me with my friends. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was my space, my sanctuary. One evening, Jessica marched into the living room where our parents were watching TV. "I want Tiffany's room," she demanded, hands on her hips. "Mine is too small for all my things, and I need more space for my study area." I looked up from my book, certain our parents would shut down this ridiculous request. Instead, Mom and Dad exchanged glances. "You know, that makes sense," Dad said. "Jessica does have a lot more equipment and educational materials." "What? No," I protested. "That's my room. I've had it since I was little." But my objections fell on deaf ears. The very next day, while I was at school, they moved all my things into Jessica's smaller room. When I came home, I found Jessica already settled in my old room, her expensive desk taking up the space where my bed used to be. "This is so unfair," I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "Life isn't fair, Tiffany," Mom said dismissively. "Your sister needs the space more than you do. Don't be selfish." I slammed the door to my new, smaller room and collapsed onto the bed that barely fit in the space. That night, as I stared at the unfamiliar ceiling, I realized something important. In this house, I would always come second. High school graduation was approaching, and I'd spent months researching colleges, writing applications, and dreaming about my future. I had decent grades and some good extracurricular activities on my resume. While I wasn't aiming for Harvard or Yale, I had my sights set on several solid state universities with strong business programs. That fateful family dinner started like any other. Grandma and Grandpa had come over for Mom's Sunday roast, and we were all seated around the dining room table. Jessica was bragging about her latest academic achievement while Mom and Dad beamed at her with pride. "So, Tiffany," Grandma Eleanor turned to me with genuine interest, "tell us about your college plans. Where are you thinking of applying?" I straightened up in my chair, excited to finally share my plans. "Well, I've been looking at State University's business program. There." "Oh, about that," Mom cut me off mid-sentence, setting down her fork with a sharp clink against the plate. We've been meaning to discuss this with you, Tiffany. Your father and I have decided we won't be able to help with your college tuition. We need to save all our resources for Jessica's education. She's got a real shot at the Ivy League, and that's not going to be cheap. You can't be serious. Grandpa Peter's fork clattered onto his plate. What about Tiffany's future? Mom sighed as if she were explaining something obvious to a small child. Look, we have to be realistic here. Jessica is gifted. She has real potential. Tiffany is ordinary. She can get a job right out of high school or maybe take some community college classes if she saves up. How dare you? Grandma's voice shook with anger. How can you dismiss your own daughter like this? Oh, please, Dad snapped, his face reddening. Let's not pretend here. Tiffany's never shown any exceptional abilities. Higher education would be wasted on her. We're just being practical. I couldn't take it anymore. The walls felt like they were closing in. Shoving my chair back, I ran from the table, tears already streaming down my face. Behind me, I could hear the continued argument, my parents' cold logic clashing with my grandparents' outrage. A gentle knock came at my door about 15 minutes later. Tiffany, can I come in, sweetheart? It was Grandma Eleanor. I didn't answer, but she came in anyway, sitting on the edge of my bed. Her warm hand started rubbing circles on my back, just like she used to do when I was little. Your grandfather and I have made a decision, she said softly. We're going to pay for your college education. All of it. I rolled over, wiping my eyes. What? But that's too much money. Nonsense, she smiled, reaching out to brush my hair from my tear-stained face. You deserve an education just as much as anyone else. More, actually, because you've worked hard for it without any support. For the first time that evening, I felt myself smile. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized I didn't need my parents' approval anymore. I had people who believed in me, and more importantly, I was starting to believe in myself. College life suited me perfectly. Away from my parents' constant comparisons and criticism, I flourished in the business program. My professors praised my analytical thinking, and I discovered I had a natural talent for understanding market trends and investment strategies. Every weekend, I'd call Grandma and Grandpa to update them on my progress. I hadn't spoken to my parents since leaving for college. They hadn't tried to contact me either, which honestly made things easier. The only updates I got about them came through my grandparents, and one particular call changed everything. You won't believe what's happening with Jessica, Grandma said one evening, her voice heavy with concern. She's completely gone off the rails. You know, she got into Princeton, your parents wouldn't stop talking about it. But apparently, once she got there, away from your parents' constant supervision, she just stopped caring about school altogether. I listened as Grandma painted a picture of my perfect sister's dramatic fall from grace. Jessica, it seemed, had discovered parties, boys, and the freedom to do whatever she wanted. Her carefully cultivated image as the family genius crumbled in a matter of weeks. Your mother called me in tears yesterday, Grandma continued. The dean's office sent them a warning letter. Jessica's barely attending classes, and when she does show up, she's either late or hungover. What are Mom and Dad doing about it? Oh, they're beside themselves. They've tried everything, threatening to cut off her allowance, promising her a new car if she brings her grades up, even flying out to Princeton to talk some sense into her. But Jessica just laughs it off. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of giving Jessica everything she wanted, my parents had created someone who didn't know how to handle responsibility. A month later, Grandma called with an update. Well, it finally happened, she said. Jessica got kicked out of Princeton. Failed almost every class, and had too many disciplinary infractions to count. I could hardly believe it. The golden child, the genius, the one who was supposed to bring glory to the family name, kicked out of college after just 1 year. She's moved back home, Grandma added. Your parents are in shock. They keep saying there must be some mistake, that the university didn't understand Jessica's special needs as a gifted student. Over the next few months, through my regular calls with my grandparents, I learned that Jessica had settled into a comfortable routine of doing absolutely nothing. She slept until noon, went out with different guys every night, and treated our parents' house like a hotel. "Your father tried to get her to at least look for a job," Grandpa told me during one call. She told him that work was beneath someone of her intelligence level. I felt vindicated and pleased. And at the same time, I felt relieved that I'd escaped their suffocating expectations and found my own path. After graduation, I landed a position as a junior investment analyst at Meridian Financial, one of the most respected firms in my hometown. Grandma and Grandpa insisted I stay with them until I got settled, and I gratefully accepted. The unexpected reunion with my parents happened on a Saturday morning at Marshall's Grocery. I was comparing prices on organic tomatoes when I heard my mother's voice. "Tiffany? Is that really you?" I turned to find both my parents standing there, looking older than I remembered. Mom was clutching her shopping cart like a lifeline. "We've missed you so much," Dad said, his voice unusually gentle. "Why don't you come over for dinner sometime?" Part of me wanted to decline, to remind them of how they dismissed me years ago. But curiosity won out. "Sure," I heard myself say. "When?" The dinner was surreal. The same house, the same dining room table, but everything felt different. My parents couldn't stop praising my job at Meridian. "Investment analyst. At such a prestigious firm," Mom kept saying. "We're so proud of you, honey." James Wilson told me they only hire the best and brightest at Meridian. I could see Jessica's knuckles turning white around her fork. She'd just quit another retail job, her third that year. Over the next few years, I worked my way up at Meridian. Each promotion came with new responsibilities and challenges, which I tackled head-on. My parents started inviting me to regular family dinners, and I accepted occasionally, maintaining a careful distance while allowing them back into my life. Jessica continued her pattern of short-lived jobs and longer periods of unemployment, never leaving our parents' house. She'd work as a waitress for a few months, then quit because it was beneath her. She'd try reception work, then leave because it was too boring. Everything changed again at one of our family gatherings. Jessica burst through the front door, dragging along a tall, well-dressed man in his 30s. "Everyone, this is Charles," she announced triumphantly. "My boyfriend." Charles was polite and well-spoken, clearly from money. Jessica spent the entire evening shooting smug looks my way. "See," she finally said during dinner, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "I bet you didn't expect me to find someone before you did, Miss Career Woman." I just shrugged and took another bite of Mom's pot roast. Jessica's attempt to get under my skin felt childish, especially given everything I'd achieved. My parents, however, were completely smitten with Charles. They hung on his every word about his family's real estate empire and his private school education. When he left that evening, promising to take Jessica to some fancy restaurant the following weekend, Mom pulled me aside. "Isn't it wonderful?" she whispered excitedly. "Charles comes from such a good family. They own half the commercial properties downtown. Jessica's finally found her path to success." I didn't bother pointing out that dating a rich man wasn't exactly a career achievement. Some things never changed. My big break at Meridian Financial came when I spotted a critical error in one of our major investment portfolios. The senior analysts had overlooked a pattern of high-risk investments that could have cost our clients millions. I stayed up 3 nights straight, analyzing data and preparing a comprehensive report. "Ms. Mitchell, this is remarkable," Mr. Davidson, our CEO, said during the emergency meeting I'd called. "How did you catch this?" "I noticed inconsistencies in the risk assessment models," I explained, walking them through my findings. "If we redistribute these investments now, we can not only avoid losses, but potentially increase returns by 12%. My strategy worked better than anyone expected. Within 6 months, the restructured portfolio showed a 15% increase in returns. clients were thrilled, and Meridian's reputation soared. I followed this success by developing a new investment algorithm that helped identify emerging market opportunities before our competitors. Then came the day that changed everything. I was called into the boardroom, expecting another routine meeting. "Tiffany," Mr. Davidson began, "we're creating a new position of investment director, and we want you to fill it." I nearly dropped my coffee cup. Investment director? That would put me in charge of all investment strategies for the firm. It was a massive promotion, skipping several traditional career steps. The first people I called were Grandma and Grandpa. They were beside themselves with happiness and pride. I shared the news with my parents at our next family dinner. To my surprise, they seemed genuinely excited. "This calls for a celebration," Mom declared. "You must have a party." "I was thinking of reserving a private room at La Maison," I said, referring to an upscale restaurant downtown. "I could invite the whole family and—" "Oh, no, no," Mom interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "You should have it here. Your father and I will help organize everything. It will be much more personal, more special. I'll invite all the relatives, order catering from that wonderful place on Oak Street." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself agreeing. Over the next week, I transferred money to my mother's account for the party expenses, and she kept me updated with regular phone calls. The evening started with such promise. I arrived at my parents' house wearing my favorite black cocktail dress and pearl necklace, a graduation gift from my grandparents. The house was beautifully decorated, with fresh flowers on every surface and elegant place settings at the dining table. The caterers had outdone themselves, the aroma of gourmet food filled the air. Family members were already there, mingling in small groups. My grandparents gave me warm hugs, Aunt Susan kissed my cheek, Uncle Robert patted my shoulder. Jessica was holding court in the living room, wearing a stunning blue designer dress, with Charles by her side in an expensive suit. Once all the guests had arrived, we gathered around the large dining table. I stood up, champagne glass in hand, ready to make my announcement. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight," I began. "Oh, sweetie, let me." Mom jumped up, cutting me off mid-sentence. Her voice was almost singing with excitement, but not for the reason I expected. "We've gathered here today," she announced, beaming at the assembled family members, "to celebrate a wonderful occasion. Our beautiful Jessica and her wonderful Charles are engaged to be married." The room erupted in gasps and congratulations. Jessica pretended to blush while showing off a massive diamond ring I hadn't noticed before. Charles smiled proudly beside her. I fell back into my chair, my champagne glass nearly slipping from my numb fingers. This couldn't be happening. The party I had paid for, my promotion celebration, had been hijacked for Jessica's engagement announcement. Looking around the table in disbelief, I saw nothing but genuine happiness on everyone's faces. Even my grandparents were smiling and congratulating the happy couple. That's when it hit me, none of them knew this was supposed to be my celebration. My parents had invited them to an engagement party, not a promotion party. My chair scraped against the floor as I stood up, anger burning in my throat. But before I could say anything, I felt my father's iron grip on my wrist. He pulled me close, his smile never wavering for the benefit of the guests, but his whispered words were ice cold. "Don't you dare make a scene," he hissed through clenched teeth. "If you ruin this for your sister, we'll cut you off completely. No inheritance, no family, nothing. Sit down and smile." I yanked my hand away from my father's grip. "No," I said, my voice cutting through the cheerful chatter. "Everyone needs to know the truth." The room fell silent. Jessica's smug smile froze on her face. "This party," I continued, my voice growing stronger, "was supposed to be celebrating my promotion to investment director at Meridian Financial. I paid for everything, the food, the decorations, all of it. My parents took my money and turned my celebration into an engagement party for Jessica without telling me." Gasps and whispers filled the room. Aunt Susan's hand flew to her mouth in shock. "That's not true. Mom tried to interrupt, her face flushing red. Tiffany, stop this nonsense right now. Show them the invitation, Aunt Susan, I said calmly. What does it say? Aunt Susan fumbled in her purse and pulled out the cream-colored card. It says join us in celebrating the engagement of Jessica Mitchell and Charles Aldridge. Charles stood up slowly, his face darkening. You told me this was a family dinner where you'd announce our engagement. You never said anything about stealing your sister's celebration. Charlie, baby, let me explain, Jessica started, but he cut her off. No, I've seen enough. He turned to me. I'm sorry, Tiffany, I had no idea. Then he looked at Jessica. This engagement is off. I won't be part of a family that treats people this way. Look what you've done, Jessica shrieked at me as Charles walked out. You've ruined everything. You're just jealous, because I found someone and you're still alone. Jealous? I laughed incredulously. I'm the investment director of a major financial firm. I don't need to steal someone else's party or trap a rich man into marriage to feel successful. That's enough, Dad roared, standing up. You've gone too far, Tiffany. You're no longer part of this family. Consider yourself disinherited. Fine by me, I said, but before I could continue, Grandpa's voice boomed across the table. Actually, David, he said, standing up with Grandma, your inheritance won't matter much. Eleanor and I have already changed our will. Everything we have is going to Tiffany. What? Mom gasped. She's the only one in this family with any integrity, Grandma added, her voice firm. We've watched for years as you favored Jessica and pushed Tiffany aside. No more. The evening devolved into chaos after that. Relatives began leaving in embarrassed hurries, Jessica ran upstairs in tears, and my parents stood in stunned silence. I picked up my purse and walked to the door, holding my head high. Goodbye, I said, not looking back. Don't contact me again. That was 3 years ago. I haven't spoken to my parents or Jessica since that night. I heard through the grapevine that Jessica still lives at home, bitter about losing Charles and his money. My parents tried to reach out once or twice, but I blocked their numbers. My grandparents, though, remain my rocks. We have dinner together every Sunday, and they're more proud of my achievements than my parents ever were. Sometimes I think about that night and realize it was the best thing that could have happened. It freed me from seeking approval from people who would never truly give it. Last week, I was named the youngest CEO in Meridian Financial's history. When I told my grandparents, Grandma cried happy tears, and Grandpa opened a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for a special occasion. To authenticity, he toasted, and to finding your own path. I raised my glass and smiled. Finally, I was exactly where I was meant to be. I was born into what you might call an ordinary family, Mom, Dad, and eventually, my younger sister Sarah. We lived in a modest 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood, nothing special really. But looking back now, I can see that's where any sense of ordinary ended for me. From the moment Sarah was born, 3 years after me, our family dynamic shifted. She was a sickly baby, always catching one thing or another. Colds turned into bronchitis, ear infections became chronic, and mysterious fevers would appear out of nowhere. I remember standing on my tiptoes by her crib, watching Mom and Dad hover over her with worried faces, checking her temperature for the 100th time that day. The irony was, I never caught anything. While Sarah seemed to attract every illness floating around, I remained stubbornly, persistently healthy. Not a sniffle, not a cough, not even a skinned knee that needed more than a band-aid. You'd think parents would be thrilled to have such a healthy child, but in our house, my good health became almost an inconvenience. I was 7 when I first wished I would get sick. I remember lying in bed one night, praying for a fever or a bad cough, anything that would make Mom stroke my hair and Dad read me stories the way they did for Sarah. I even tried faking a stomachache once, but Mom just took one look at me and said, "You're fine, Gloria. Now go help me with the dishes." As we grew into our teenage years, the pattern only became more pronounced. Sarah, at 11, spent most of her time resting on the couch or in her room, while I, at 14, became practically our house's maintenance staff. It started with regular cleaning, but over time, Mom's concerns about germs turned into a full-blown obsession. Every surface had to be sanitized multiple times a day. The floors needed mopping at least 3 times, sometimes more if someone had walked through with shoes on. God forbid a speck of dust settle anywhere near precious Sarah. "But Mom, I just cleaned everything an hour ago," I'd protest, staring at the already spotless floor. "Don't argue with me, Gloria," she'd snap, thrusting the mop into my hands. "Do you want your sister to get sick? Do you want her back in the hospital?" That became her go-to weapon, guilt. Any resistance on my part was painted as a direct attack on Sarah's health. Meanwhile, Sarah would watch TV or read magazines, occasionally throwing me a sympathetic look but never offering to help. Why would she? She was the sick one, after all. The cleaning routine became almost ritualistic. Morning, sweep, mop, dust. Afternoon, repeat. Evening, repeat again. Mom would inspect everything with the intensity of a military sergeant, finding invisible specks of dust and demanding I redo entire rooms. The smell of bleach and disinfectant became so constant that I stopped noticing it, just like I stopped noticing the ache in my arms from all the scrubbing. The constant cleaning and caretaking was wearing me down. Between school, housework, and trying to maintain some semblance of a normal teenage life, I felt like I was drowning. That's when I spotted the help wanted sign in the window of Miller's Diner, just 3 blocks from our house. "I want to work there," I announced at dinner that night, watching Mom cut Sarah's meat into tiny pieces even though she was perfectly capable of doing it herself. "I'm 16 now." "A diner?" Mom's nose wrinkled. "Gloria, do you know how many germs?" To my surprise, Dad spoke up. "Let her try it, Helen. It might be good for her to have some responsibility." I nearly laughed at that, as if I hadn't been shouldering responsibility since I was 7. But I kept quiet, not wanting to jeopardize this unexpected support. The diner became my sanctuary. Sure, the work was hard, carrying plates, dealing with grumpy customers, cleaning tables, but it was different from the endless cleaning at home. Here, I was valued. Mrs. Miller, the owner, actually thanked me for my work. Customers left tips with genuine smiles. For 4 hours every afternoon, I wasn't just Sarah's sister or the healthy one, I was just Gloria, the reliable waitress who remembered their coffee orders. Every penny I earned went straight into my secret savings account. When Mom asked about my paychecks, I'd shrug and say I was buying school supplies or new clothes. She never questioned it, as long as they didn't have to spend money on me, they were happy. But the diner was just part of my escape plan. During the day, I threw myself into my studies with the same determination I'd once put into cleaning our house. I joined every academic club I could, entered every competition, and signed up for all the advanced placement classes our school offered. Gloria Martinez, my chemistry teacher, announced one day, perfect score on the state science Olympiad. Again. My classmates clapped, but I was already thinking about how this would look on my college applications. I needed a full-ride scholarship, my future depended on it. The day I got my acceptance letter from State University, complete with a full academic scholarship, I wasn't even surprised. I'd worked too hard for any other outcome. But I waited to tell my parents, knowing what was coming. Sure enough, a week later, Mom and Dad sat me down at the kitchen table. Sarah lingered in the doorway, pretending not to listen. "Gloria," Mom began, her voice heavy with practiced martyrdom, "we need to talk about college. With all of Sarah's medical bills. We just can't afford to help with your tuition," Dad finished, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "The treatments have taken everything we—" "I got a full scholarship," I interrupted, pulling out my acceptance letter. "Everything's covered, tuition, room and board, even books. You won't have to pay anything." The relief on their faces should have hurt, but I was past that. What I didn't expect was the flash of envy that crossed Sarah's face as she skulked away from the doorway. State University was 800 miles from home, and honestly, that wasn't far enough. My dorm room was tiny, with mint green walls and a squeaky bed, but it was mine. No cleaning schedules, no guilt trips, no constant reminders of Sarah's needs. I declared my major in business management right away. I figured if I could handle entitled customers and daily totals at a diner, I could handle anything the business world threw at me. "We'll try to send you some money when we can," Mom had said during our weekly phone call. "But Sarah's new treatment is very expensive, and..." "It's fine," I cut her off, already knowing the script. I found a job at the campus cafe. The cafe job wasn't bad. I worked between classes and some weekends serving overpriced lattes to sleep-deprived students and professors. The tips weren't as good as the diner, but the flexible schedule made up for it. Plus, they let us drink the mess-up drinks for free, which saved me plenty on caffeine. Sometimes I called my parents. Every conversation followed the same pattern. Mom would list Sarah's latest health issues, Dad would mumble something about bills, and they'd both find ways to mention how expensive everything was. I'd learned to keep my responses short and change the subject quickly. I only went home for major holidays. Sarah would usually be there, looking less sickly each time but still playing the role of the delicate flower. Then came the news that Sarah had graduated high school. I wasn't able to attend the ceremony, or at least, that's what I told them. Finals were a convenient excuse. "We're so proud," Mom gushed during our next call. "She's going to attend Madison College. Their medical program is excellent, and they have a wonderful student health center." I gripped my phone tighter. "That's great. How's she paying for it?" There was a slight pause. "Oh, we'd been saving." The irony hit me like a slap. After years of "we spent everything on Sarah's treatments and we just can't afford college right now," they'd somehow managed to find enough money to send her to a private college. I thought about my own scholarship applications, the countless nights spent perfecting essays while also maintaining my grades and working at the diner. "That's wonderful," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm happy for her." "We just want what's best for her health," Mom added, as if I might have forgotten their eternal justification. After hanging up, I sat on my bed and let out a long breath. The familiar bitter taste in my mouth wasn't exactly anger anymore, it was more like validation. Every scholarship I'd earned, every extra shift I'd worked, every penny I'd saved had been the right choice. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at Bennett & Associates, a mid-sized consulting firm. The starting salary wasn't impressive, but I saw potential. While other new hires complained about long hours and tedious tasks, I threw myself into every project. "Martinez," my supervisor called out one Friday afternoon, "that efficiency protocol you suggested for the Thompson account? The CEO loved it. Keep this up, and you're going places." I did keep it up. Every project, every presentation, every client meeting became an opportunity to prove myself. I developed a reputation for innovative solutions and attention to detail. When I proposed a new customer relationship management system that saved the company thousands, the senior partners took notice. The promotions came steadily after that. Junior analyst to senior analyst. Senior analyst to project manager. Each step up meant more responsibility, more respect, and yes, more money. I moved from my cramped studio to a decent one-bedroom apartment, bought some proper furniture, started building an emergency fund that had nothing to do with escaping my family. "Your quarterly numbers are exceptional," Mr. Bennett himself told me during my third-year review. "How would you feel about heading up our new digital transformation division?" I was 30, making six figures, and finally feeling like I'd built something solid for myself when the call came. "Gloria, honey," Mom's voice had that forced cheerfulness I remembered so well. "You must come visit this weekend. This is important family news. Sarah will be so disappointed if you're not here." Some things never change. I rearranged my schedule, delegated some tasks to my team, and booked a flight home. The house looked exactly the same when I arrived, maybe a few more cleaning supplies by the door, but otherwise unchanged. Sarah's car was in the driveway, along with an unfamiliar blue sedan. Mom opened the door before I could knock. "Gloria, come in, come in. Everyone's in the living room." Sarah was perched on the couch next to a tall man with glasses and a nervous smile. Dad sat in his usual armchair, and Mom quickly reclaimed her spot next to Sarah. "Gloria," Sarah beamed, "this is David, my fiancé. We're getting married." Sarah continued, holding up her left hand to display a sizable diamond ring. "The engagement party is in 2 weeks. You'll come, right?" I managed a smile and appropriate congratulatory noises. David seemed nice. But something felt off. Throughout dinner, the conversation kept circling back to my career. Mom, Dad, even Sarah couldn't stop asking questions. "So what exactly is your title now?" Mom pressed. "And you manage how many people?" Dad wanted to know. "Digital transformation, that sounds impressive," Sarah mused. "Must pay well?" I answered each question vaguely, years of practice helping me deflect their increasingly pointed inquiries about my finances. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this sudden interest in my career success wasn't just casual conversation. 2 weeks flew by in a blur of work deadlines and project meetings. Before I knew it, I was back in my hometown, pulling up to the Grand Plaza, easily the most expensive restaurant in the city. Sarah waved to me from the entrance, wearing a designer dress I knew she couldn't afford on her entry-level nurse's salary. David stood beside her, looking uncomfortable in his new suit. The private dining room was packed with faces I barely recognized, distant relatives, old family friends, what seemed like David's entire extended family. Crystal glasses clinked, waiters glided between tables with bottles of champagne, and elaborate flower arrangements centered each table. The evening progressed through course after expensive course. Imported caviar, wagyu beef, vintage wines. I couldn't help doing the mental math, this had to be running into the thousands. On my last visit, Sarah had mentioned struggling to make her student loan payments, and I knew David worked at a local library. The numbers weren't adding up. "Another bottle of champagne for table 3. Sarah called out to a passing waiter, not even glancing at the wine list. She caught my eye and smiled. "We have to celebrate properly, right?" Finally, as the dessert plates were being cleared and guests were starting to gather their things, the restaurant manager approached our table. He was carrying a leather folder. "The evening's final bill," he announced, looking expectantly at the group. Before anyone else could move, Sarah gave an airy wave. "Oh, my sister Gloria will take care of that." She smiled at me with artificial sweetness. "She's very successful, you know, a big executive in the city." The manager turned to me and extended the folder. I took it, opened it, and felt my blood run cold. The number at the bottom had far more zeros than I'd expected, even with my worst-case calculations. I looked up to find every eye at the table on me. Mom and Dad wore identical expressions of studied nonchalance, as if this had been the plan all along. David looked mortified, but said nothing. And Sarah? Sarah was smirking, actually smirking, like she'd just pulled off some clever trick. They'd planned this. All of it, the excessive menu choices, the premium wines, the endless appetizers. The constant questions about my job and salary during their surprise announcement. They'd set me up, assuming I wouldn't dare cause a scene at my sister's engagement party. I closed the bill folder and stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The restaurant had grown quieter, other guests sensing the tension at our table. "I'm not paying this bill," I said, my voice steady. "This is the first I'm hearing about any of this." Sarah's face contorted. "What do you mean you're not paying?" "Of course you're paying. You're my sister." "Gloria," Mom hissed, "don't make a scene." David's parents exchanged alarmed looks. His mother leaned forward. "I'm sorry, what's happening?" "We thought the bill had been arranged." "Nothing was arranged," I said, looking directly at Sarah. "They just assumed I'd pay without asking me." Sarah shot up from her chair, face red. "You selfish bitch. You make all that money and you can't even help your own sister? What kind of person are you? Sarah, honey, please calm down, David tried to intervene, reaching for her arm. She yanked away from him. Don't tell me to calm down. She's ruining everything. She's always been jealous of me. The scene devolved quickly. Sarah grabbed a wine glass and hurled it against the wall. Then a plate, then another. Crystal shattered, guests gasped, and David's parents stood up, horrified. David tried again to calm her, but she shoved him so hard he stumbled backward into a waiter. I didn't stay to watch the rest. I grabbed my purse, walked out of the restaurant, and drove straight to the airport. I booked the first flight home while sitting in the terminal, my hands shaking not from fear or anger, but from a strange sense of relief. The mask had finally dropped. They couldn't pretend anymore. My phone started ringing at 7 a.m. the next morning. Mom's number. How dare you, she screeched, before I could even say hello. You've ruined everything. Sarah is devastated. The engagement is probably off now, and it's all your fault. My fault? I let out a harsh laugh. You tried to scam me. Scam you? We're family. You make more than enough money to help your sister have her special day. You're just being selfish, like always. Dad's voice cut in, they had me on speaker. You humiliated us in front of everyone. You need to make this right. Make it right? I repeated. You mean pay for the bill you tried to trick me into covering? Well, yes, Mom said, as if it was obvious. And since you've caused all this trouble, you should pay for the wedding too. The venue Sarah wants is $40,000, and that would be a good way to apologize. I couldn't help it. I started laughing. Not polite laughter, but deep, borderline hysterical laughter. Let me be very clear, I said when I could speak again. I'm not paying for the engagement dinner. I'm not paying for the wedding. I'm not paying for anything. And please, don't call me again. I hung up, blocked their numbers, and went to make coffee. I had a meeting in 2 hours, and I wasn't going to let their drama derail my life anymore. A week after the restaurant disaster, I was scrolling through Facebook during my lunch break when I saw it. David's relationship status had changed to single. A few clicks revealed that Sarah had removed all their photos together. The engagement was off. I wasn't surprised. After watching Sarah's meltdown, any sane person would run for the hills. What did surprise me was the post that appeared on my feed later that evening, written by my mother and shared by what seemed like every relative we had. With heavy hearts, we must announce that Sarah's engagement has ended. While we usually keep family matters private, we feel we must speak out about the cruel and deliberate actions that led to this heartbreak. Our eldest daughter, Gloria, had promised to help with the engagement celebration and wedding costs, knowing how much this meant to her sister. But at the engagement dinner, she purposely humiliated Sarah in front of both families by refusing to pay the bill she had agreed to cover. This calculated act of sabotage came from a place of long-time jealousy and resentment. We have always known that Gloria envied the attention Sarah needed due to her health issues, but we never imagined she would stoop so low as to deliberately ruin her sister's happiness. Sarah is devastated, and David's family was so shocked by the scene that they encouraged him to reconsider the marriage. Our family is torn apart because one person chose spite over sisterly love. To those who wonder why we're sharing this publicly, we believe it's important to stand up to toxic behavior, even from family members. Especially from family members. The comments poured in like poison. I always knew there was something off about Gloria. So cold and distant at family gatherings. Poor Sarah. She's been through so much already with her health issues, and now this betrayal from her own sister. How could anyone be so heartless? Family should support each other. Aunt Margaret, who hadn't spoken to me in years, chimed in, Helen, I'm so sorry your daughter turned out this way. You and Richard were such wonderful parents to both girls. Some people are just born selfish. Cousin Rachel, who'd attended the engagement, I was there. Gloria just walked out while Sarah was crying. She didn't even try to explain or apologize. Shocking behavior. Even distant relatives I barely remembered were joining the pile-on, each comment more viciously righteous than the last. Not one person questioned my parents' version of events. Not one person wondered why I might have refused to pay. Not one person reached out to hear my side. The narrative was set. I was the villain who destroyed my sister's happiness out of jealousy. The successful but bitter older sister who couldn't stand to see her younger sibling happy. The cold-hearted career woman who chose money over family. I began typing. I've never been one to air family drama publicly, but since my parents have chosen to share their version of events, I feel compelled to share the truth. No, I never promised to pay for Sarah's engagement dinner or wedding. In fact, I knew nothing about these supposed obligations until the restaurant bill was handed to me at the end of the evening. The truth is simple. My parents and sister orchestrated an elaborate dinner at one of the most expensive restaurants in town, invited 50 guests, ordered premium everything, and then expected me to cover the massive bill without any prior discussion or agreement. When I refused to pay for this surprise expense, Sarah had a meltdown that included throwing and breaking restaurant property. I left to avoid escalating the situation. The next morning, my parents called to berate me. They demanded I pay not only for the engagement dinner but also for a $40,000 wedding. They never denied planning this ambush. In fact, they defended it by saying I'd make enough money to cover these expenses. Don't take my word for it. Listen for yourselves. I attached the audio file. I'd recorded that morning's phone call out of pure instinct, thank goodness. Their voices rang out clear and damning. Mom, you make more than enough money to help your sister have her special day. Dad, you need to make this right. Me, you mean pay for the bill you tried to trick me into covering? Mom, well, yes. And since you've caused all this trouble, you should pay for the wedding too. The venue Sarah wants is $40,000. The comments started immediately, but these were different. Oh my God, Gloria, I am so sorry for assuming the worst. I can't believe they tried to stick you with a bill like that without warning. Who does that? Helen and Richard, you should be ashamed of yourselves. This is exploitation, not parenting. Aunt Margaret, Gloria, honey, I owe you the biggest apology. I should have known there was more to this story. Cousin Rachel, I was at that dinner and I knew something felt off about the whole thing. I should have spoken up sooner. I'm so sorry, Gloria. Even some of David's family members commented, saying they'd had concerns about Sarah's behavior and stability, and that the broken engagement had more to do with her actions than anything I'd done. My parents tried damage control, claiming the recording was taken out of context, but it was too late. The truth was out. I didn't stick around to watch the fallout. I blocked my parents' numbers, blocked them and Sarah on all social media, and deleted the Facebook app from my phone. Enough was enough. That was 6 months ago. I haven't spoken to any of them since. Sometimes I get messages from relatives passing along news, Sarah's seeing a therapist now, Mom and Dad are in family counseling, but I don't respond. Maybe someday they'll understand the damage they've done, but I'm not holding my breath. For now, I'm focused on my life, my career, and the family I've chosen, friends who support me without trying to exploit me. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel guilty about putting myself first. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away. Even from family. Especially from family.